All right, welcome to the bonus session, the VIP session. How's it going?
Great.
We probably don't need that microphone for this room, huh? Not with 20-something people in here. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Are you guys excited?
Yes.
I'm actually going to step down here for you guys until we fill the room up. Super excited. This is, for some reason my slide got messed up there. This is a really fun session for me because this is stuff that I normally only get to share with my coaching members. Of all the NLP stuff that I teach, you know, there's the kind of beginner stuff, there's the intermediate stuff, and then there's the advanced stuff. And what I find is I've been working with people now for 15 years professionally, as a coach, as a therapist, working with friends and family, you know, working with anybody, especially in the beginning, working with anybody that wanted help, anybody that was eager for it. In the beginning, I was so fascinated with NLP. NLP really is, at its very basic, the programming language of the mind. And so my goal this weekend is to teach you guys that programming language of the mind to help you learn how to clear everything that has ever held you back. And it's going to be a fun weekend. And I'm really glad to get started with you guys here on the VIP session. So this is called the Success Principles. And I'm going to share with you guys some of the most advanced stuff, the stuff that I find really makes a difference in terms of mindset. Now this weekend, we're going to learn a lot of foundational stuff about your subconscious mind, how your mind works. You're going to learn some techniques called time techniques, which are part of NLP, which I think are the most powerful form of self-help techniques available. Time techniques has absolutely turned my life around. And I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today if I hadn't learned it. And you know, the bulk of what switched it in my life was a 15-minute exercise. And so that's the culmination of the weekend. By Sunday, we're going to be learning those techniques. The beauty of this, it's different than most other NLP motivational trainings, if you want to call it that. I don't call this a motivational training. The difference is that a lot of times you go to a motivational training and the person on stage, I mean, almost all speakers, you know, if you've ever been to a speaking event, almost all speakers use NLP. It's kind of the little secret in speaking. The difference is they all use NLP on the audience, whereas I'm going to teach NLP to you. So when you walk home, when you go home, you're going to walk out of here with everything that you need in this manual to continue the transformation, right? This isn't a lecture this weekend. You guys are actually going to do, we're going to do techniques. You're going to get to experience the same kind of transformation I experienced. But then when you go home, the question is, how do you continue it? Because, you know, a lot of times people go to a motivational event and what happens? They go home on Monday, they're all rah-rah. By Tuesday, they're raw. By Wednesday, they're Thursday, they're back to their old normal life, right? Energy, and nothing's different. And then, you know, usually what happens is they wait until the next motivational event comes along and then they buy tickets and they go again, right? And I know a lot of people who've been to those kind of motivational events literally 25, 26, 28 times, right? At $800, $900 a pop. Because they go home and they don't know how to continue it themselves. So that's one of the big differences with this weekend as opposed to other NLP trainers, other NLP teachers you might see out there. I'm actually going to teach you guys the tools. You will be fully equipped when you go home to be able to do time techniques and every other tool that I'm going to teach you here this weekend. Most importantly though, more important than just the tools, you're going to understand yourself. You're going to understand your subconscious mind, what makes you tick, why you do the things you do. And I think that's a gift. You know, we come into this world without an instruction manual. And so, you know, understanding why you do what you do and how your brain works, how your mind works, I think is really important. So thanks for attending the VIP session. Your VIP upgrade entitles you this weekend to lunch on Saturday and Sunday to the Power to Create Your Life Now home study course. So there's good news about that. We have right now a home study course that we created about 1.5 years ago. We recorded the Power to Create Your Life Now, the 3-day course, in audio, and it's a really good audio recording. This last time we decided to capture it on video. So we've got 3 cameras in the room. I've got 2 cameras in the back and a GoPro up here that's going to capture the whole weekend. And our hope is, if everything goes well, knock on wood, cross your fingers, because you know how technology is. But if everything goes well, hopefully we'll have a good recording of the weekend and we're going to turn it into a video home study course as well. So you guys will all get a copy of that video home study course if and when it's done. I'm knocking on wood. I'm intending for a perfect recording this weekend. So as you can see, I've got 3 microphones on here. I'll be adding a 4th once we get the battery for my video recorder. And we're doing like full redundancy here this weekend to make sure we get it on video. So, so you get that Power to Create Your Life Now home study course. The home study course is great because, I mean, here's the thing. You're going to sit through, 20-something hours of training this weekend. How much are you going to remember consciously? Okay. There's a lot you'll remember subconsciously, and there's a lot of subconscious transformation that will happen. But it's great to go back, I think, every 6 months, every year, and to re-listen or re-watch the course to remind yourself of things, because we're sort of like an onion sometimes. You peel off one layer of the onion, you go back and watch the course a second time, it's a whole different course. You hear things you didn't hear the first time. It's sort of like watching the movie Airplane. Or, I've seen Airplane 25-something times. Every time I watch it, I see a new joke I didn't get the first 25 times, So you'll get that Power to Create Your Life Now home study course. That also has high-quality studio recordings of all the techniques. Right? You guys will have the ability to go home and do the techniques yourself, but I get a lot of people that say, Michael, I would love to just have your voice lead me through it. So I finally got really good quality recordings of those done as well. So if you want to use time techniques or Ho'oponopono or any of the things we're going to learn here this weekend, you'll be able to just pop in some headphones on your iPhone or your Android and listen to it. Also comes with my book, Unstuck, The Owner's Manual for Success, and this VIP session here. All the bonuses can be found at this link right here, transformdestiny.com/members only. Does everybody have one of these? Our packet for this afternoon session? Awesome. All right, so who is Michael Stevenson? This is the guy that most of you know. If you've been following me at all, is that a little out of focus? My face looks out of focus. So this is the guy most of you know. You've probably seen me on Facebook, or you've seen me on webinars or videos, or listened to my radio show. You've maybe read one of my books. This is what everybody looks at. Now, a lot of times people look at me and they go, well, Michael, it's easier for you because you're already successful, right? But there's a lot of people who, as a matter of fact, until just a couple years ago, I never told my backstory. It's funny, I was sitting at lunch with somebody one day, talking with them, and the topic came up, and I kind of told them about my story growing up, and it's like, at the end of it, their jaw was on the floor, and they said, you have to tell people this. And I said, why? Why would anybody care about my past, my childhood? To me, it just, I didn't want to come across as like, whiny or, focused on the past or anything like that. And they said, you don't understand. This is something that people need to hear, because this is the product of NLP, right? But I don't think that people really realize the power of NLP until they see where it came from. When I was 9 years old, December 1982. I lived in a little tiny town in St. Louis, just outside of St. Louis, about 40 minutes outside, called Times Beach, Missouri. Anybody familiar with St. Louis area? Times Beach. If you go there now, it doesn't exist anymore. Times Beach was this little tiny beach town on the shores of the Merrimack River. And it was a thriving town in the 20s. It was a resort town where everybody would go for vacation, and then it just sort of became a tiny little town, kind of a poverty town. And when I grew up, my parents were pretty poor. I remember them arguing and yelling at each other, saying that combined they made less than $19,000 a year. My mom was only 14 years old when I was born. So she dropped out of junior high, never got a diploma from junior high. My dad worked at Chrysler from the time that he was about 18 years old. And the two of them struggled pretty hard. When I was 9 years old, we had a natural disaster that wiped out everything that we owned. Literally had to go back to ground zero. We ended up moving in with my grandparents, having nothing. I remember at the time all I had was a paper sack that had 2 changes of clothes in it. And everything else got wiped out. So everything that I owned for a couple of years was all stuff that was hand-me-downs, right? It was donations from friends, it was charity, it was, one time the teachers at school got together a bunch of stuff and brought it to us. And, it was a complete reset on life. And through my teenage years, my parents divorced after that. Through my teenage years, I went through a very tumultuous time. And ultimately, at 19 years old, this ended up being my home. I made a lot of decisions at the time, and I thought that those decisions were irreversible. The arguments that I had with my family, the strife that I was having, the anger that I was carrying with me, the sadness. I had deep, deep sadness in my teenage years. I had no idea how to deal with it at all. I had no coping mechanisms, no outlet. My mom was the kind of person where if I started showing any emotion, she said, I don't want to hear it from you. You don't know how bad I've got it, right? So it was always a comparison. If I was sad, my sadness wasn't valid because my mom was sadder, or if I was angry, it wasn't valid because my mom was angrier. So I, through that invalidation, not being able to express myself, I started bottling myself up. I was very shy, extremely shy, because we tended to move sometimes every 6 months, sometimes every year, depended on whether my mom, every time my mom lost a job or lost a boyfriend, one of the two, we were moving somewhere. So what happened by the time I was 19 years old, I was kind of running away from all that. I ended up out here on the streets, and it's funny because it was just supposed to be for one day. I just didn't have anywhere else to go. I'd sort of run out of couches to sleep on, and nobody would let me stay with them. So I ended up just kind of hanging out in this park one day saying, well, I'll figure it out tomorrow. And this is something I'll talk about during the main event as well, but I'm a firm believer that your mindset is a spiral. A lot of people don't think about this. Our beliefs, we all know how powerful beliefs are in our life. Your beliefs shape everything. If you have empowering beliefs, then that tends to, unlock things in your life. If you have disempowering beliefs, it tends to lock things out. It tends to give you, less options. Well, the funny thing about it is, where do your beliefs usually come from? For most people, there's lots of places they come from. They come from family, they come from media, they come from school, they come from everywhere. But one of the biggest places that your beliefs come from is your results. So every time you get a result that's less than pleasant, it actually affects your beliefs and creates limiting beliefs out of it, right? You ever tried to do something and failed? Right? Most people aren't very likely to try that thing again because they allow that failure to become part of their new belief system. Then the new belief system affects them, which gives them negative results, which then makes the beliefs even more disempowering, right? So most of the time what you see is that people are spiraling. They're either spiraling upwards because the results that they're getting are empowering their beliefs, they're making them more confident, they're strengthening their belief systems, or they're spiraling downward toward greater levels of despair. And that's what was happening to me. I was in a downward spiral. I was out of control. I never did any drugs or stole cars or robbed banks or any of that kind of stuff. I was just an impulsive teenager. And I was really hurt and angry. So I ended up sleeping out here for 6 months. Those 6 months were probably the most significant growth period in my life. From the time that I ended up out there, I ended up on the streets as a kind of a sniveling kid, angry at the world and angry at, everyone else that I felt like had put me there. By the time I got off the street, something had changed. Something had changed significantly in my mindset. And I didn't know what it was at first, but that change completely turned the trajectory of my life in the other direction and began to propel me toward where I am today. And so, I don't live my life on the streets anymore, although I am currently homeless. Using NLP, having this new mindset in my life for the last 22 years now since I've been on the streets, has really allowed me to do some things in my life that I think most people think is not possible for them. But it is, right? It is possible to live your life to the max. There's this old thing that you see sometimes where in personal growth seminars they do this thing called the Wheel of Life, where they give you a graph that looks like this, right? And it's got these little hash marks on it. And people always say, I'm doing really well in my career, for instance. If you shade in career looks like this, man. I'm on a good path in my career, but no, I don't get to see my family that much, right? And I'm doing really good on the finances side of things, but this isn't going so well. And what you find is that people tend to be living their life like this, sort of like a broken wheel. If you put a wheel like that on your car, it wouldn't be a very smooth ride, right? One of the things I'm going to promote this weekend is that it's possible for you to live your life with all 6 areas of life maxed, right? It's possible to live a life where every area of life, your career, your finances, your health and fitness, your family, your relationships, your personal growth and development, your spirituality, every area of life is, it's like all cylinders are on fire. It's possible to do that, but most people think it isn't. One of the biggest reasons for that, I think, is that most people are living their lives with a conscious mind only. We tend to be going through our lives with only our conscious mind and not tapping into that vastly powerful 99.994% of the mind that is left over. Your conscious mind, we'll talk about this later on in the seminar, your conscious mind makes up only 0.006% of your entire mind. You know, there's people all the time that say, we only think with 10% of our mind. No, it's way less than 1%. It's 6/1000th of 1% is your conscious mind that you consciously think with. So the other part of your mind, the 99.994%, we spend most of our lives ignoring, certainly from the time we're about 10, 11, or 12 years old. So the big question is this: what is NLP? What is neuro-linguistic programming? Let's break it down, because NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that's like a big mouthful of words, right? The guys that created NLP were a linguist and a computer programmer. So they liked big fancy $5 words instead of, little $1 words that we can all understand. Let's break it down. Neuro is having to do with the nervous system. The nervous system is our primary interface between the mind and the external world. Okay? So this nervous system that we have in our body, these nerves, these eyes, these ears, the tongue, the nose, this is our only connection with the external world, is our five senses. So the neuro part of neuro-linguistic programming has to do with your nervous system. We process the external world through our senses. Okay? These senses are called visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. In other words, it's the things you see, the things you hear, the things you feel, the things you smell, and the things you taste. That is our only connection with the external world. So the only connection between the internal world of the mind and the external world is those senses. Next is the linguistic part. Linguistic is language, right? It's the language that we use, both internal and external language. So there's two kinds of languages that we use. We use external language to communicate with other people, right? That could be English, it could be Spanish, it could be Chinese, it could be, what's that made up? Esperanto, right? It could be many different languages that we use to communicate with people. Now, most people have never focused on improving their language since when? Elementary school, right? Beyond elementary school, the only way that we ever improve our language is mostly through vocabulary, right? We just try to learn new words. I remember, in junior high and high school doing those vocabulary tests. I hated them, They were tedious. That's the only way that most people learn how to communicate beyond elementary school. So most people actually speak at about a 5th or a 6th grade level. In the publishing industry and in the movie industry now, they're telling people not to publish books or movies that are beyond a 5th grade level of comprehension, right? So it's kind of interesting to think about where we're at these days. So that's the external language, but we also have an internal language. We have a language that we communicate to ourselves with, that the subconscious mind uses to communicate, which is different. So we use both of those to communicate and influence thoughts, feelings, and actions, and we do that through these channels: pictures, sounds, feelings, smells, tastes, and then internal dialogue. So if you can imagine, every single thought that you think at a subconscious level, every thought you think is not so much made of words, it's made of experiences. So if I were to ask you, for instance, what was the color of the very first car that you ever drove? You would answer me, you'd give me a color, but how would you know what that color is? Visual people can tell me right away, right? How do you know what color your very first car was?
Non-color white.
A non-color white, right? So how do you know it was white, though?
Memory.
It's a memory, right? You bring up that memory in your head, you could easily tell me what your car looks like because you could look at that car in your head. Okay? Now, some of us are more aware of those pictures or movies. Some of us are less. Right? So I remember when I was a kid, I had a really hard time, quote, visualizing. I thought that visualizing was something that was like a skill that other people had and I didn't. The fact is, we all visualize. Your subconscious mind can't not visualize. Matter of fact, they've even shown that people who are blind from birth visualize. They don't necessarily see the same things in their mind that you and I see, but they certainly do have an internal image that can be made inside the head. So a lot of times it's just becoming aware of it. So the pictures in the movies, the sounds, and the feelings, those first three things right there, pictures, sounds, and feelings, are what really drive us at the subconscious level. This was discovered, it was one of the very first discoveries in the field of NLP. Our whole experience of life, everything that we do, is dictated by the pictures, the sounds, and the feelings that we hold at the subconscious level. So for instance, whether you are motivated to do your taxes or not, comes down to a picture. It's a sound and a feeling. Most people look at their taxes and they get a pretty bad feeling, so they avoid them. Until, what happens? April 15th starts to come along, you start making pictures in your head of the IRS being mad at you, that creates a motivating feeling to get it done, and then you finally do it, right? So it's mostly the picture, sounds, and feelings at the subconscious level. Now the funny thing is, this part right here, this self-talk, this is how most people think that they think. Because consciously, we've got this little voice that goes on in our head. We talk to ourselves, that little voice. That little voice that just said, what voice, right? What voice is he talking about? That voice that we have a dialogue with ourselves. Most people think that that's their mind speaking. And it is your mind. It's a part of your mind, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of 1%. 6/1000th of 1%. That's what we call the internal dialogue. The internal dialogue is the part of your mind that takes those subconscious pictures, sounds, and feelings and turns them into words. And then we have a conversation with ourselves. But the fact is, most of the time, if we have something in our life that we're not happy with, like I used to be incredibly shy, for instance. I could not approach strangers under almost any circumstance. I was so shy that, I mean, some of you in this room I've never met before, right? If I were to be late for something like a restaurant, and I needed to know where that restaurant was, and you were a stranger on the street, I would start this dialogue in my head that would say, go up and ask that guy. He probably knows where the restaurant is. And then there'd be another voice that would come up that would tell me not to do it. And then I would have this battle, this tug of war that would go inside of me. And the whole time there's this sort of other voice that was going on saying, just take a step, just move. But I couldn't get my feet to move. No matter what I would do, I was so shy that it was like my body got gripped and I was frozen. And I was frozen in this internal dialogue. So the funny thing is, we think that that dialogue is our mind, and we say things to ourselves all the time, like, just stop it, this is stupid. Does that solve the problem? Of course not. I remember I used to chew my fingernails until I would chew them all the way down to the quick, till I couldn't chew them anymore, until they'd get like infected and pussy, and then I would switch to the other hand and I would chew those, and I would chew them all the way down, and I would keep trying to find little pieces that I could chew. I've chewed my fingernails ever since I was a kid. And I tell myself all the time, stop it. Stop biting your fingernails. Think it worked? Of course not. And this is where so many people get frustrated, right? Because we have things that we do in our life that we don't know why we do. And then we say to ourselves, don't do that, but then we don't stop and we can't figure out why we don't, so we think we're broken, right? This is like, you ask any teenage kid that does something wrong, why'd you do that? And they go, I don't know, right? Because our behavior is largely driven by things that are subconscious, we're not even aware of. So instead of learning how to talk to ourselves, what we need to do is we need to learn how to change those pictures, sounds, and feelings at the subconscious level. That's where the real power is. And NLP is a field of tools that help you change those pictures, sounds, and feelings. Does that make sense? Yeah? Good. Finally, the last word is this. It's programming. Programming is all about patterns. I used to actually be a computer programmer. Before I got into the field of NLP, I was a computer programmer. I didn't like it very much, but I was particularly good at it. And I did internet programming. I did everything from the back end to the front end. So I programmed in 6 different languages. I created the databases. I did all the database maintenance. I basically made myself a one-man show that would normally take 5 or 6 people to run. And so I had great job security. I was very successful as a computer programmer, even though I didn't like my job. Like, I think most people, right? Most people that have a day job, it always cracks me up because I ask people all the time, I say, what did you major in college? I majored in arts. Well, what do you do? I'm an accountant. What? How did that happen? And the funny thing is, I ask people all the time, I go, well, how did you get into that field? And they go, I don't know, it just happened. Right? Your whole career choice in life just happened. Kind of interesting how people live their lives or how people let life happen to them, right? So when I was a programmer, the biggest part of programming is finding patterns, right? Programmers look for patterns and they program patterns. They program repetitious things so you can push a button and your computer will do something for you. Well, the same thing is true with the mind. We have programs and patterns that run in the mind most of the time that we're unaware of. Like, for instance, most of you would have no idea how a Word document works. If you actually saw a Word document with its clothes off, it would be a jumble of ones and zeros. You wouldn't be able to understand it at all. So, but when we look at it on the computer screen, it assembles it in such a way that it makes sense. Well, we have these programs subconsciously too, and sometimes if you pull the covers on it, you wouldn't understand why that program runs that way. You go, why do I do those kinds of things? That's so strange. So the programming part of NLP is discovering and using the programs, the patterns, and the strategies of the mind to achieve what we want in life consistently. To consistently achieve what we want in life. See, the thing is, it's sort of like taming a horse, right? You ever watch somebody try to tame a horse? Or has anybody here ever tamed a horse before? Yeah? It's a struggle in the beginning, right? Of course. That horse doesn't want to have anything to do with you, and the horse wants to prove to you that it's the boss. But what you have to do is you got to be patient with it. You got to discover the horse, right? You have to actually get to know the horse to the point where it can be calm with you, where it can trust you, where you can have a relationship with it. The same thing is true with the subconscious mind. The fact is, unknowingly, most of us have been mistreating our subconscious minds for decades. And typically the worst way to mistreat it is just to ignore it. Most people just ignore their subconscious minds. We're told from the time depends on if you're a boy or a girl, but from the time we're about 10 to 12 years old, we start getting told things like, you need to grow up. Right? It's not okay for you to be whiny and cry anymore. Emotions are bad. You better control those emotions. Well, where do your emotions come from, do you think? Are they conscious? Are they logical? They're subconscious, right? That's why, by the way, you can, a lot of times when people have something sad happen in their life, how do they cope with it? Shut it out. Distraction. I hear people all the time, they go, oh, I just lost my mother. I need to get back to work. I need to just get on with life. Because they think that getting on with life helps them grieve. And it seems like it for a while, right? Because when you go back to work, you forget about the thing that happened, and it seems like it's gone until something comes and triggers it again and it rises to the top. And it'll keep doing that. Year after year, month after month, however long, until you finally cope with it. Most of us don't really have coping mechanisms. We've never been taught an appropriate way to actually deal with negative emotions in our lives. We're just taught you're not allowed to have those, stuff it. Man, for teenagers, especially these days, you're not even allowed to have happy emotions, right? If you're too happy, then you're told you're obnoxious. Oh, you may even have ADHD. We should maybe look at putting you on medication because you're just too happy. You are way too hyperactive, right? So we're told that emotions are bad. We're told that intuition is wrong, right? It can't be right. It's just a hunch. It's just a guess. You don't know for real. So we're told to ignore our hunches. Your hunches, by the way, come from your subconscious mind. We call them the whispers. We're told that it's not okay to be playful anymore. Think about how easy it was to learn when you were a kid. When we were kids, it was so easy to learn. We learned everything because we learned by playing. Everything was a game. Everything was fun. It engaged our mind, engaged the whole mind, not just the conscious mind, not just the logical mind, but the fun, creative, playful part of your mind, your subconscious mind. And we were experts at learning until we got to be about what? 10, 12, 14 years old. Then learning had to be hard. Then we have to learn by rote. Everything has to be logical and organized so that we can take our state aptitude tests and make the school district look good. Right? But here's the thing. Once we actually start paying attention to the subconscious mind, once we get that door open and we start creating a relationship with our subconscious mind, which, by the way, your subconscious mind is you. It's not like this other entity. It's not like this other thing. It's you. It's a part of you, 99.994% of you, that you just haven't probably met yet, or at least not for a long time. Once you actually start to develop that rapport and learn the patterns, the beauty is that you basically know how to run your mind. right? It's like having that lost user manual for the mind. And that's my real definition for NLP, is the lost user manual for the mind. So what is it really? In other words, NLP is how we use the basic language of our mind to consistently achieve the results we want in life. I think a lot of times when people hear me talk about NLP, they go, what, are you trying to tell me if I learn NLP, nothing bad will ever happen to me again? No, bad stuff happens, right? There's unfortunate things that happen in life, but how you deal with it is the question. How do you deal with the bad stuff when it comes up? How do you leverage the good times when you're having them? And it's all about learning how to run the mind. So I think if we were given a user manual for the mind, unfortunately, most people wouldn't have read it in the first place. So I'm glad you guys are here, right, to learn about that. So let's talk about creating success. When it comes to creating success, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about success. One of the biggest, somebody asked this the other day, a couple months ago on Facebook. They said, what's the most disempowering thing that you hear from people? Or what is the most common thing you hear from people who are disempowered, was the question. And there was a lot of different answers that came up. But the thing I think I hear most is, you're so lucky. People tell us all the time, they say, you're so lucky you found your soulmate. You're so lucky you get to travel the world. You're so lucky you have the money to do that. You're so lucky you have a job where you don't have to sit in a cubicle 8 hours a day. You're so lucky, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. And here's the thing, like, what is luck? It's an illusion, right? It's random chance. So essentially what they're telling us is, your life is not your fault. It's a random chance that you're successful and happy. And it's a random chance that I'm not happy. If the universe had rolled the dice in my favor, then I would be the one that's rich, or I'd be the one that's happy, or I'd be the one that's good looking, or whatever it is. And I think that's what a lot of people think, right? A lot of people think that life is just a hand of cards that was dealt at birth, and they just got to play them for the rest of their life. But the fact is, you can create success in your life. And let me talk about really quick the definition of success. Somebody actually sent me an email a couple weeks ago and said, Michael, why is the definition of success money, wealth? And I answered back, I said, I can't answer that because that's not my definition. To me, can money be a part of success? Absolutely. Wealth can be a part of success. I personally don't think that wealth is success. And I say that from personal experience, because when I was a computer programmer, I made about $250,000 a year, which according to the US tax code is wealthy. And I was miserable. I had all the money that I could want. I didn't know how to spend $250,000 a year. I spent most of it on my kids. I just didn't want that much stuff. But I had more money than I knew what to do with. I had the house I wanted, the car I wanted, my kids were going to the best private school, they had all the toys that they wanted, and I wasn't happy in life. So I know for myself, wealth doesn't equal success. And I'll tell you, my definition of success, it's a one-word definition, is this: fulfillment. I believe that you're successful when you're fulfilled in life. Now, that may be a different definition than other people have, but the question is, what is fulfillment? And this is my picture of fulfillment right here. When you've got every one of these areas of the life, money's included in there, wealth is great. I don't poo-poo wealth at all. To me, this is fulfillment. That's success. When you have balance in your life. How many people you know that make gobs of money and they can't remember their kids' names, right? Because they're at the office 18 hours a day, right? And they're about to have a heart attack, so their health isn't very good either. To me, when you've got all 6 areas of life pegged at a 10, then the next question is this: how can I make this right here my new 1 and find another 10 in my life? It's about finding that, constant and never-ending improvement of growing yourself for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think you grow yourself because you only get one chance here on earth, right? You only get one opportunity, unless you're Hindu, then I think you get to come back 1,000 times, but right? You get pretty much one chance on earth, at least that I'm consciously aware of. Okay, so you got to live it to its fullest, fulfillment, filling your life to the fullest with everything that you can do to grow your life, enrich your life, because when you enrich your life, you can enrich others. and you can inspire others. I'm a firm believer that mediocrity is a disease. I think it's a disease that has infected the majority of the world these days. It's infected those people that we call average. Mediocrity is a disease. The good news is there's a cure. But we got to get that cure to more people. So my definition of success is fulfillment. It's filling your life and growing and continual growth in your life so that you become a better person yourself. You're constantly focused on excellence in your life, and then you're inspiring others around you, whether it's your children. How many people here are parents? Right? One of the big things that I realized in my life was my kids were not listening to what I was telling them. They were watching me. My kids were watching how I lived my life. And I started to notice by the time that they were 10, 11, 12 years old that they were beginning to live their lives the way that I was living my life. Right? I could see them modeling what I was doing, not what I was saying. And so I had a realization in my life that if I was going to inspire my kids to live a magnificent life, I had to live a magnificent life myself. That was huge for me. So that's my definition of fulfillment. And of success. So the thing is this. Number one, you cannot succeed in life without a plan. You know, most of the time when you see successful people, that success was meticulously calculated. It was planned out. There was action that was taken. These people actually decided what they wanted in life and they created it. Look at somebody like a Thomas Edison, for instance, a Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. Look at somebody like a Mother Teresa. Look at somebody like Gandhi. Right? These were people who had decided what they wanted to begin with, and they actually did something about it. They actually took some action in their life. But it starts with a plan. Because if you take action with no plan, where are you going to end up? Who knows, right? Can you imagine just getting in the car and just driving, especially with blinders on, right? That's how most people live their lives, just driving in a random direction without being able to see out the front windshield. That's how most people live their life. So we've got to get into a planning state in our life. In life, it's one of our big sayings in NLP. In life, you get what you focus on. So we've got to learn to focus on what you want. Great post that I saw yesterday on Facebook. Worry is a misuse of the imagination. Worry is a misuse of the imagination. Imagination is so powerful. It's so powerful that, you know, if you were carrying a tray of drinks, anybody ever done this before? You're carrying a big old tray of drinks or something in your hand, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I hope I don't drop this. And you start making pictures of yourself tripping and the drinks falling off and crashing on the floor, and then what happens? Oh, there they go, right? That's the power of the imagination. Because when it really comes down to it, you know, your body is a robot that responds to instructions from the mind. And I can prove it. So here's what I want you to do. Everybody close your eyes for a second. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine yourself sitting in your most comfortable place to sit in your home. That place where you sit when you're relaxing, when you're nice and cozy, feeling comfortable and safe. And in your mind's eye, I want you to stand up from that place. Feel the weight shifting on your feet. Feel your clothes shifting on your body. As you look around, you see all the familiar sights of home, all those little knickknacks that you've picked up, the things that make your place yours. You feel that familiar feeling of home. As you walk toward the kitchen and walk into the kitchen, perhaps you notice a slight temperature change. Make your way to the refrigerator. Reach out with your hand, grab onto the cold, hard handle. And as you tug on the refrigerator, it makes that sound that all refrigerators make when the seal breaks. And the light turns on, the cold air begins to flood out. And you look inside and see all the stuff, all the food. And you see one thing which perhaps you hadn't seen before. Inside, there's a bowl of perfectly ripe yellow lemons. Reach into the cold air and grab one with your hand. Feel the cold, bumpy rind of the lemon under your skin. And as you turn around and look toward the counter, there's a cutting board and a knife. Pick up that knife. Slice the lemon in half and listen as the knife tears through the flesh. And begin to smell that lemony smell already. Take one of those halves and cut it in half again to make a lemon wedge. Just a little bit of the juice spurts out on your skin. As you pull that wedge up toward your face, you can see the light glinting off the flesh. You can smell that lemony smell. Go ahead right now and take a nice, big, juicy bite of that lemon. Good. Open your eyes. How was that? Do you guys notice that there's more saliva in your mouth now than before we did it? Now that's kind of interesting, right? Because was there really a lemon? No. Some people go, yeah. There was no lemon. But the fact is, your body thought there was, right? Your body, what other function would there be for producing more saliva in your mouth right now? There's no other function for that. So what we've done right now, just in a 30-second kind of little experiment, is we've proven that your mind has control over your body. You know, in medical journals, there are still articles that come up sometimes every few months, every year or so, that say, is there a mind-body connection? As if there's a question, right? So one of the things I always like to say is your body is just a robot that responds to the instructions from the mind. If you make a picture in your mind of tripping over something and drink spilling, you'll find something to trip over. You'll spill those drinks all over the place. The flip side, though, is that if you make a picture of yourself putting the drinks safely on the table, the end result, then you'll do that almost every time. You greatly increase your chances of success by taking yourself to that end result and focusing on it. This is something about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I bought my very first motorcycle. I bought a Ninja. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought a Ninja was what I wanted. But I remember riding it home the first day. I did not have experience riding motorcycles, although I had a scooter. But it's very different riding a motorcycle. And I remember like leaving the lot, and I went to a parking lot and was just going up and down the parking lot, probably 50 times, just trying to get used to the clutch and the gas and trying to figure out how to keep this thing up, you know. And then I decided to take a really backside street, a neighborhood side street, 25 miles an hour all the way home. It had speed bumps on it, which scared the crap out of me, right? And I remember like driving, and I'm only in like second gear. I'm going 25 miles an hour, and I'm imagining myself falling over, hurting myself, crashing into a car pulling out in front of me, car hitting me, you know, tumbling this way, tumbling that way. Couldn't shut the pictures off in my head. And I knew, because of what I know from NLP, I knew that if I kept focusing on that, what was I going to attract? Crash, right? Crash my brand new motorcycle. So what I did is I pulled over to the side of the road and I stopped. And I basically made the commitment to myself that I was going to park the motorcycle there and walk home if I couldn't get the pictures out of my head. So, you know, the funny thing is people say to me all the time, they go, how can I stop making pictures of something negative? Am I just supposed to imagine positive? Am I just supposed to imagine riding home and not crashing? Oh, wait, I said not crashing. What's that making me think of right now? Crashing. So that doesn't work either. And this is one of the big things with NLP most people don't realize. What you have to imagine is the end result. Okay? The key to me getting those pictures out of my head was not to try to change the pictures and see myself riding without crashing. The key was to see myself in my apartment, dropping off the motorcycle, you know, in the carport, putting it in the spot, and turning it off and getting off the bike, right? End result. When we fast forward ourselves to the end, to what we really want, and we focus on that, we're much more likely to get what we want. Okay. You must live your life on purpose. This is another key to creating success. You must live your life on purpose. I feel like most people are living their life by default. Most people are almost like a pinball in a cosmic pinball machine. And they just bounce off of whatever comes in their life. You know, whatever obstacles come up, they just crash into it and let it change their direction. So to me, what I find is, and I've studied a lot of successful people in my life, is that once you find a purpose in your life or create a purpose in your life, then that purpose gives you an avenue to success. It's crazy. I talk to people all the time. I've been coaching people for 15 years now. And I'll get people all the time that will say, I'll say, what's your goal? And they'll go, I want to be a millionaire. Why? How? Most people don't even think about that kind of stuff, right? How are you going to do it? To me, the only fulfilling way to become a millionaire is to serve people, is to actually do something fulfilling that helps people. I know a lot of people that have become millionaires other ways. You know, they find some sort of scheme or they win the lottery or whatever it is. Does it work out? Not usually. Statistics show that I think it's 87% of all lottery winners are broke within 2 to 5 years. Right? So having a purpose, in my life, it has been one of the things that's really helped me find the perfect 10. And then you're in charge of your focus and therefore your results. And this is one of our big presuppositions of NLP, one of our big beliefs, is that nobody can control your focus but you. You're the only person that can change your focus. I was the only person that could change my focus on the motorcycle. And if I didn't shift my focus, I was going to get what I focused on, right? So we're going to talk a lot this weekend about how to change your focus. Who here is familiar with Napoleon Hill? Right? Wrote one of the best, I think it is still the best-selling business book that's ever been written. More copies sold than any other book in business. I heard somebody say once that it's the number 2 best-selling book next to the Bible. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's sold a lot for certain. Napoleon Hill, most people know Napoleon Hill as kind of like the guru of self-development. You know, they think of Napoleon Hill as the guy who wrote Think and Grow Rich. That's true. He did write Think and Grow Rich, but a lot of people don't know the backstory. See, Napoleon Hill was not always successful. He was not always wealthy himself. He didn't always know the keys to success. Napoleon Hill actually began as a simple reporter. Back in the days, in the early 1900s, reporters didn't get paid very much money. If you were a reporter, you were basically freelance, which meant you had to go out and find news yourself. And you had to report on it. And then you had to submit your story to the editor, and the editor would either approve the story and pay you or throw the story in the trash can. So there was a lot of reporters back then that would work and they wouldn't get paid. You know, some reporters would continually submit reports. Maybe they weren't good enough yet. And their work would just get thrown in the trash can. They'd never earn any money from it. Now, Napoleon Hill had been a reporter for some time. He had a moderate success in reporting, but he wasn't by any stretch successful or wealthy. Matter of fact, he and his wife were pretty poor. And they had, bigger challenge than that. They were, a young married couple that had a baby boy that was disabled in a very strange way. He was born with no ears. Imagine somebody being born with no ears. I mean, I don't just mean the external part, like this part here. There was no ear holes. Baby couldn't hear at all. They didn't even know if there was an eardrum inside of the baby's head. And so, there was this challenge because Napoleon Hill, not only was he not making a lot of money, he worked hard to try to support his wife, his young baby. So he'd be gone days at a time trying to find, news to report on and trying to get his stories bought. And his wife was at home struggling with this baby. And so as the baby grew up, the baby couldn't communicate what it wanted. And so the baby would, as he got into a toddler and, 3-4 years old, would actually start to violently act out because he couldn't communicate what he wanted. And so they were struggling. They were having these challenges. And the flip side, if Napoleon Hill was kind of on the bottom side of success, the flip side of success was Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie was the world's very first billionaire. And not only was he a billionaire, he was a self-made billionaire. He came from abject poverty and generated billions and billions of dollars in personal worth. Carnegie, being a self-made billionaire, he knew a lot of other self-made successes as well. And he had this idea that there were patterns to success. Okay? This is exactly what the field of neurolinguistic programming was built on. Patterns of success. A lot of people don't know. NLP is not a field that was invented. It wasn't created like a lot of these other kinds of fields were created from nothing or from research. What NLP was is a field of modeling. The whole field of NLP is about finding people who are excellent at something, finding people who are a success, and then determining what makes them a success. Then that model gets added to NLP, and the tools and the techniques that come with it get added to the field of NLP. So really when it comes down to it, NLP is really bringing in success from many different places. We've modeled successful salespeople. Anybody who's ever been anybody in sales? Yeah, you ever been to a sales training? You've probably learned rapport, for instance, matching another person's physiology. And they tell you that you can gain rapport that way. A lot of people don't know where it came from. They've modeled successful therapists. NLP actually started by modeling someone named Virginia Satir. Virginia was she was one of the most famous family therapists in the world. And she was famous because she could get results with clients that almost nobody else could. As a matter of fact, if there were other therapists that had resistant clients and they kept working with them and they wouldn't change, they would refer those clients to Virginia Satir and all of a sudden they would be cured, right? Whatever their family issue was or whatever their, maybe they had an internal conflict or something, it would be gone in very short order. And so Virginia Satir was one of the very first people that they studied in the field of NLP. Was how was she actually getting people to change? Interestingly enough, it all came down to her language, which is kind of funny. But the whole field of NLP is about finding patterns of success in any field. We've even modeled, for instance, back in the 1980s, Greg Louganis was modeled. They found out what was the difference that made Greg Louganis a champion, right? Remember Greg Louganis? He was a world champion diver. And he was head and shoulders above all of the other Olympic athletes. By the way, the Olympic athletes are like the best, right? They're the best of the best of the best. And for some reason, Greg Louganis was better than all of them. And so what they did is they had to try to find what was the thing that made him different. Did he do things different physically? Did he actually physically dive differently than the other divers? That's part of it. But there's so much more than that. It goes deeper than just what he was doing physically. There are things like, what are the belief systems that Greg Louganis had? Belief systems that supported him in being that good of a diver. What were his values and his ethics and his morals? What is his identity? Right? There are all these things that make us up at the subconscious level that all contribute to our success. I always talk about Michael Jordan in basketball. Right? Arguably the best player that ever played basketball. Was he the tallest? Nope. Was he the fastest? Nope. Did he jump higher than anybody else? He was a pretty good jumper, right? Did he have a fantastic shooting average? Michael Jordan shot about 56%, which means he missed almost 1 out of every 2 baskets that he shot, right? There was something different about him, though. It didn't come down to just, shooting the ball. Everybody goes through the same practice shooting the ball every time. They all have to do the same drills from the time that they're in high school all the way up to championship basketball. There was something about Michael Jordan that made him different, that made him a champion. Andrew Carnegie knew the same thing was true with self-made successes, financial successes. Now, Carnegie, there's a lot of limiting beliefs about wealthy people these days. A lot of people think that wealthy people are greedy and they don't care about people and this and that. And Andrew Carnegie was not that kind of a guy. His goal, his outcome, was that he wanted every person on the face of the earth to become a billionaire. His feeling was that if everybody became wealthy, then there wouldn't be problems that we have now, like poverty. Right? Poverty would disappear if everybody became wealthy, right? Interestingly enough, there's people who go, well, if everybody became wealthy, then there wouldn't be rich anymore. Really, like wealth is a big problem to have. I'd rather have that problem than the one we have right now where there's people who can't afford to eat or have water, right? So Andrew Carnegie believed that everybody in the world could become wealthy, that everybody could become abundant. And he believed that if you could model him, what was the thing that took him from poverty, right, having no education, to becoming a billionaire? If you could figure out what that pattern was for not only him, but all of these other self-made successes, then you'd be able to teach those patterns to the people in the world, and everybody in the world would become wealthy, right? Sounds pretty amazing. He didn't have the time to do it, though. He was a busy guy. So he started thinking to himself, who is the kind of person that I could commission, that I could task with studying these people? He had a whole list of people that were self-made millionaires and billionaires. Who's the person that I could commission and task with this that would be the right person for the job? So he started thinking about people that he'd met over the years. And there was one person that came to mind. It was Napoleon Hill, because Napoleon had interviewed him once in the past. And he liked Napoleon. He thought he was a good stand-up guy. Carnegie knew that there were 3 things that all successful people do. Okay? If you look at virtually anybody who's been a success, there are 3 things that all successful people do. The first thing is this: successful people make lots and lots and lots of decisions. It's kind of one of the big things that you notice between successful people and everybody else. Most people avoid decision making. Most people avoid responsibility, whereas successful people are the people that tend to run towards it, right? They're the kinds of people that want the decision making power. They're the kinds of people who want that responsibility. They want to take charge. They want to be what? Leaders, right? That's one of the big differences between successful people and everybody else. Successful people make lots of decisions. They don't shy away from that responsibility of making decisions. The second thing that all successful people do is this. They make decisions quickly. Most successful people make decisions in an instant. And there's been a lot of study of this, actually. If you look at highly successful people, when they come to there's that old joke from Yogi Berra, when you come to a crossroad, when you come to a fork in the road, take it, right? Most successful people, when they come to a fork in the road, they don't stand there and look at the signs. They don't look around and, is there anybody I can ask? They don't hem and haw on it. They don't call 1-800 Ask Miss Chloe, When something comes up, highly successful people tend to check their gut and they make a decision. They don't tend to think, this is another big common thing, by the way, they don't tend to think that failure is final. If they make a decision and it doesn't work, no big deal. We'll course correct, we'll do something different. But you keep moving forward. Right? So I love Harv Eker talks about this. He says, the difference between successful people and everyone else is, everyone else, their attitude in life is this. They go, ready? Aim. 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 Most people never, ever pull the trigger, right? They think about the things they want in life. I wish I could travel. I wish I had a bigger house. I wish I had somebody who loved me. I wish I was thinner. I wish I was cuter. I wish I was whatever it is, right? Most people, they think about the things that they want. They look at the target. They just never pull the trigger. Harv Eker says the difference is that successful people, their attitude in life is this. Ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim. Successful people will take a shot, see how they did, and then make a correction and take another shot. Whereas the average person will never take a shot in the first place because they're afraid. Think about this. They're afraid they might not hit the bullseye. They're so terrified that they might not hit the bullseye, they never even take a shot at the target. The third thing that all successful people do, once they start on a path, they always finish. Successful people just don't stop. This is something Thomas Edison said. The saddest thing is that most people quit just before the point of success. They don't see the fruits of their labor immediately. They get discouraged and they quit. The fact is, if they had just pushed forward for a little while longer, they would have gotten that success. There's actually a great story in the book Think and Grow Rich about a man that bought a plot of land because he was told that there was gold on the land. Didn't know anything about gold, didn't know anything about mining, didn't know anything about geology. But he bought the land and he bought the machinery to drill it. And when he put the machinery on the land, he turned it on, and almost immediately as it began drilling in the ground, gold started coming out. And he was like just elated. He thought, I'm going to be the richest man in the world. So he took the gold, changed it in for money, and squandered it. Spent every penny of it. He spent it boozing it up. He spent it partying. He didn't reinvest the money in any way. He just blew it. Then he went back to the land, right? Unlimited source of money. Went back to the land, switched on the machine, dirt. And he kept digging, dirt. And he kept digging. It was just dirt and rocks is all that kept coming up. And he couldn't figure out what was going on. This went on for days, weeks, months, until he finally lost all hope. And the story goes that he walked into town. The very first man that he found was the town junkyard man, who was a drunk. And he offered to sell the land and the machinery for pennies on the dollar. The junkyard man bought it, but very quickly admitted that he knew nothing about geology, knew nothing about the ground or how it worked or any of that kind of stuff. And so he went and hired someone. He hired an expert. The expert came and looked at the machinery. Now this is the difference, by the way, between, a lot of times people either average, this is another big thing to put on here, not Carnegie's rule, but one of mine. Most people either don't seek counsel or they seek counsel from people who are not qualified. In other words, friends, family, coworkers, right? When they don't want to do anything of magnificence in their life, they don't go and ask people who did the magnificent thing. They ask their friends. Like, for instance, we teach a book writing course. We get people all the time that said, yeah, I told my friends I was going to write a book. They said, oh, that's too hard. You'll never get accepted by the publishers. That's what their friends tell them, right? Because their friends don't know any better. So most people don't seek counsel from people who are actually qualified to give the counsel, right? So this man went and hired someone. He hired somebody who was an expert, a professional. That person, notice the distinction, by the way, of how little change has to happen. That person came and told him, all you have to do is move the machine 3 feet. It turns out veins of gold, when they run on the ground, they actually run at a slant. The way that the man had set up the drill, drilled into the ground, hit the gold, and then kept drilling this way. And the guy said, all you have to do is move the machine 3 feet this way, hit the switch, and you'll hit one of the biggest veins of gold in history. And it turned that town junkyard man into one of the richest men, right? And so this is the power, by the way, of seeking somebody. And this is what Napoleon Hill did, by the way. Napoleon Hill was a poor guy. He didn't go to other poor people and say, I want to be rich, right? Because you're not going to get a lot of great advice. He had one of the greatest mentors, Andrew Carnegie. So these are the 3 rules of success. Successful people make lots of decisions. They make them quickly. And once they start on a path, they always, always, always finish. Never, ever take your eyes off the end result. So ultimately what happened was Napoleon Hill received a telegram from Carnegie. Carnegie said, I'd like to see you in my office. Nothing more, nothing less. When Napoleon got this telegram, he talked to his wife. The only money that he had was the money in his pocket. They didn't even have a bank account. They were so poor. And looking at the amount of money they had, they essentially had enough money for him to buy a train ticket to Carnegie's office and back home again. And that was it. So he talked to his wife about it, and he said, I really believe that this is a chance for me. He said, I don't know what the future entails, but Carnegie is an important man. He wouldn't be calling me unless it was important, and he decided to take the chance. So he went to the train station, bought a ticket to Carnegie's office. When he got there, Carnegie sat him down and he told him about this idea of finding the patterns of success, going out and modeling 200 of the world's self-made millionaires and billionaires. And he was looking at Carnegie and looking at these 3 rules and asking himself, or he was looking at Napoleon Hill and asking himself, Napoleon Hill was the right man for this job. Now, Carnegie knew there are always 3 big obstacles that come up anytime that there's, an opportunity in your life. There's always 3 big things that come up. People say, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. Yeah. And then, those are the 2 big ones, right? So Carnegie wanted to kind of throw these at Napoleon Hill to see how he would react to this. So he tells Napoleon Hill about this thing. He tells him, we've got this list of 200 millionaires and billionaires. I think that if you were to study these people, not only would you be able to find the patterns of success and be able to teach them to others, but I believe that you'd be a wealthy man on your own. So he throws the first obstacle at Napoleon Hill. And he says, I want you to know, by the way, that this is no short task. If you were to study these people, and by the way, studying didn't mean going and spending an hour in their office and interviewing them like a normal reporter would. Napoleon Hill often spent up to 6 months at a time with each person on the list. He would essentially live with them. He would shadow them. He would tail them every day so that he could observe their patterns. He could observe their decision-making skills. He could see how they were creating that success. Often 6 months. So imagine 200 people. That is no small task. He said, I imagine this task will take the better part of 20 years of your life. And it did. It took Napoleon Hill over 20 years to complete this task. And he very carefully watched Napoleon Hill. He watched his facial expressions to see if there was any sign of doubt, any sign of fear, any hesitation whatsoever. And there was none. So then he threw the next obstacle at him. He said, furthermore, I will not fund this project. He said, I could very easily, by the stroke of a pen, write you a check that would make you an incredibly wealthy man. But he said, I will not fund this project because I believe that the person who undertakes this task, if you apply to yourself the principles that you learn along the way, you will become a wealthy man yourself. And he did. Napoleon Hill amassed a wealth of almost $20 million over his lifetime after learning the success principles. So again, he very carefully watched his face. Any signs of doubt or hesitation, there were none. So then he decided to throw the third thing. He wanted to see if Napoleon Hill was the right kind of person for this task. So unbeknownst to Napoleon Hill, he had a stopwatch in his lap underneath the desk. When he proposed the question, he said, so, are you the man for the task? Do you want this task? He clicked the button on the stopwatch. He had exactly 60 seconds to make a decision. Carnegie later said if it took Napoleon Hill 61 seconds, he would have known he wasn't the man and he would have rejected him and moved on to the next candidate. But it took him, as the story goes, 22 seconds to say yes. And Napoleon Hill went on to become the guru of self-development, a wealthy man himself. And by the way, I don't think there's a way to prove this, but I think single-handedly created probably more millionaires on the face of this earth than anybody else, right? There are so many people that when you look at them and you say, what's the secret to your success? One of the things they list is the book Think and Grow Rich. It is, I think, a fantastic book. If you have not read it, then there's in the bonus section on the members-only site, you guys can download the PDF of that and read it for free. It's a great, great book. So you can, because it's a PDF, you can put it on your cell phones and read it. I really highly suggest it. Good stuff? Awesome. So let's look at the next page. Talk about abundance. Abundance is a mindset. It's so funny because, Kayla and I were just having this conversation with a friend of ours who was talking about, wealth. And their belief, and I think the belief of so many people, like probably the majority of people, is that wealthy people became wealthy. And we don't even need to say wealth. I mean, I like the word abundance because it kind of wraps everything up. But let's just say successful people became successful because either A, they had advantages that nobody else had, right? They were either born to a wealthy family or they got an education, they went to better schools, and maybe they got to go to an Ivy League school. So that's what most people think. Or B, they did something out of integrity to get it. They screwed people over, robbed people, did some sort of a scheme or whatever. Or C, it was just the roll of the dice and they got lucky. And that's, we talk to people all the time that they think those are the only three ways that people become successful. Most people, we've been conditioned in our life to believe that wealth is not something that's for everybody. And I really think the reason for that is because we've been conditioned to believe it by a corporate system. We live in a world where we're told that the way to be successful is to get your degree, go work for a company, right? Take whatever they pay you, work really hard so they pay you more, and then, it's funny, I saw this thing on Facebook the other day that said you were not put on this earth to just pay bills and then die. But I think that's how a lot of people are living their life, right? We've been conditioned to believe that it's somebody else's job to determine our value. And I think we need to take back that power, right? I talk to people all the time, why do you make the money you make? Well, that's what they offered me. You didn't think of turning it down or asking for more money? No, I didn't want to lose that opportunity, right? People don't negotiate. It's amazing. I ask people all the time if they negotiate when they go into their interviews. Do you negotiate a salary? No, I just take what they offer me, right? So we've been kind of conditioned in life to believe that somebody else determines our value, that somebody else tells us how much we're worth. And then we just accept it. The majority of people that I know are not happy with the amount of money that they make. When I ask people all the time, would you like to make more money? Yeah. Do you like the amount of money you make right now? Yeah, not so much, right? Or most people I know are not entirely happy with the job that they have because we're always allowing other people to determine our value. So I want to talk about mindset because I think mindset plays a huge, huge part in not only how much you earn, but what you receive in your life. So abundance is a mindset. Your mindset is a result of many things. Wealthy people cannot be poor. They're just not programmed for it. You take away everything from, and you could switch out anybody else's name. You could switch out Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates, I just read, has been the richest man in America for 22 years. $74 billion, I think, is his net worth right now. If you literally took all of Bill Gates' money away, all of it, I really think that it would take, how long would it take for him to be wealthy again?
Less than a year, probably.
Could be less than a year. I think certainly the statistics show 2 to 5 years. Right? 2 to 5 years. That's with nothing. Now, the flip side of that, unfortunately, is many poor people can't be wealthy unless they change their mindset, right? They're just not programmed for it. It doesn't mean that poor people are bad people. I spent at least half of my life being poor, right? I don't think that poor people are bad people at all. As a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of goodness and kindness in poor communities that's not recognized often. It's one of the reasons I love the show Secret Millionaire. If you've ever seen that show, they take a millionaire and they strip them of their fancy clothes and put them in normal clothes, and they give them a welfare wage to go back, which is usually like $48, I think, to go back for a week to some impoverished town. And the interesting thing about it is, what do they find when they get there? They find charity, they find outreach programs. There's goodness all over the place. It's not, a lot of people I think that poor towns, there's just lots of shootings and stuff like that. There's all kinds of good that goes on there. So I don't think they're bad people. They just lack the programming for wealth. And again, the statistics show, by the way, the majority of people who play the lottery are people who are classified as in poverty, right? A lot of the lottery money comes from people who are poor, people who are working minimum wage jobs, and there's actually stories of people who go in every week and spend their entire paycheck on lottery tickets because they're waiting for that big break, right? They think, man, if I spend $300 on lottery tickets this week, then one of them is going to hit and I'm going to be a millionaire. And they don't realize how staggering the odds are. What is it, 4.5 million to 1 or something that you're going to win a big prize? They don't realize how staggering the odds are. They think 300 tickets is going to make an impact in those odds. It really doesn't make much of an impact at all. There's people who go spend their whole paycheck on it, right? So statistics show overwhelmingly that when people who are in a poverty mindset win the lottery, and it doesn't matter, by the way, if it's $2 million or $20 million win, right? Statistics show the amount of money has nothing to do with it. That those people, 87% of them are broke within 2 to 5 years. Broke. The money's gone. As a matter of fact, most of them are in debt. Many of them are in more debt than they've ever been in their life, right? And a lot of them are depressed, and some are even suicidal because they thought the money was going to change something, right? They thought the money was going to make all their problems go away, or they thought the money was going to this or that, whatever. But what happens is, if they're not programmed for it, if they don't have the right mental programming for wealth, it's like trying to grab sand. You can grab at it, but the more you squeeze, the more squeezes through your fingers. You can't really grab sand like that. It's the same kind of thing when it comes to wealth. See, and by the way, we're talking about both extremes here. Okay? We're talking about wealthy people, we're talking about poor people. How about all the rest of us in the middle? The fact is, it's your mental programming that determines your abundance right now. There's a great quote from someone, I don't know who it is, but they say, how much money you make right now is a reflection of your mindset. Right? It's not who you are, but it's who you think you were that's created that amount of money in your life right now. The fact is, if you talk to most people who created their own wealth, right? Most people who hit that level of success where they were struggling, bang, and all of a sudden they hit it, they'll all tell you that it was a mindset shift that did it. Right? There was some sort of a shift in their mindset. You are what you think. So let's talk about how this works, this mindset stuff. You have a conscious mind. We'll take a break in a few minutes. You have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. Now, that's kind of a metaphor, right? Because really when it comes down to it, you have a mind. You're conscious of some of it and you're not conscious of most of it, right? So there's always this, like a lot of people think it's two minds that you have this mind and you have that mind. It's not true. You have one mind and you're conscious of about 6/1000th of 1% of your mind. Okay? So the number is 0.006%. You are only consciously aware of 0.006% of your mind. You also have a subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is the other 99.994%. Your subconscious mind has been shown in the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I don't know how to spell that, that your subconscious mind can process at minimum 2 million bits per second of external information. 2 million bits per second. That's not even counting what your subconscious mind is processing internally, which we can't even measure. So your subconscious mind is hugely powerful. And it's a part of your mind that for most people is lying there dormant. Well, as a matter of fact, I think most people think their subconscious mind just sabotages them, which it doesn't really do, right? Your subconscious mind just gives you what you focus on. But this divides because it's at that subconscious level, and if you think about it really, conscious mind can handle about 126 bits per second of information. 126 bits per second of information. While the subconscious mind is handling 2 million bits per second of information. Oops. That comes from the book Flow. Your subconscious mind is amazing, as you're going to come to find out this weekend. It is at your subconscious mind, only at the subconscious level, that your mental programming exists. See, your conscious, it's so funny because consciously most people think, for example, if I were to say money is the root of all evils, right? This is something we've heard a million times. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or Jewish or any denomination of religion that actually believes that or not. We've heard it so many times that it almost becomes a subconscious belief. Now, is money the root of all evil? No. As a matter of fact, most people don't realize that phrase, money is the root of all evil, is it's a misquotation of a mistranslation, right? But what happens is, if we allow that to get into the subconscious mind, if we allow that to burrow in and take root, we could say all day long, of course I know that money isn't the root of all evil, but subconsciously it still drives us, right? Subconsciously it's still in there, that programming underneath the hood. And what happens is it becomes a filter. It becomes a filter. So that, imagine that, putting on glasses. And everything that you see through those glasses is filtered by that belief. Your subconscious mind is where your values exist. Values are, really quick definition, values are what drive you. They're what's most important to you. It's your subconscious mind that harbors all of your beliefs. It's your subconscious mind that has all of your untapped potential. Is it fair to say that we all have more potential than we think we do? I think we're probably tapping into a fraction of a percent of all of our potential. No matter how much you tap into, there's always more. And your subconscious mind is responsible for most of your behavior. Most. We do have behaviors that we do consciously, a few of them, but all the rest of those behaviors are called habits, right? Your subconscious mind is in charge of all those subconscious behaviors, which we call habits. Now, imagine having a habit for wealth. Imagine having a habit for success. Imagine having a habit for health, for instance. There's people who have these kinds of habits, but the majority of people don't develop habits for wealth, for instance. Now, Donald Trump has a habit for wealth. I think by this point, Donald Trump, Bill Gates, all of these guys in the billionaire club, by this point, wealth is an automatic process for them. They just wake up in the morning thinking of ways to make more money, right? Or thinking of ways to come up with more products, or thinking of ways to serve more people. It's just natural to them by that point. So in many ways, what we have to do is we got to learn how to tap into the subconscious mind to create these habits, to create these potentials, these beliefs, these values that are so important. It's these that determine your results. right? Your values, your beliefs, your potentials. Good stuff? Awesome. All right, it's about 2:25. We're going to take a quick break. Be back here at we'll call it 2:40. Before we go, one thing I like to do when we go to breaks, there's a word that we really love here at Transform Destiny. It's one of my favorite words. It's a Hawaiian word called hakalau. And hakalau literally translates into, in Hawaiian, it translates into head festival, or a party in your head. So like a lot of times you go to a live event, when you hear something that really blows your mind, they want you to say, aha, out loud. When you hear something here that blows your minds, I want to hear hakalau, okay? Everybody say it all at once. It's just fun to say. 1, 2, 3, hakalau. Isn't that fun? Yeah?
I learned that it was how to create the zone.
It is, yeah. So we're going to go deeper into what it means. But the actual literal definition in Hawaii is a party in your mind, yeah. So what we're going to do, every time we go to break, I'm going to have everybody stand up. We're going to stretch a little bit. We're going to reach for our toes. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and we'll reach for the sky and say hakalau. And I promise this is as Tony Robbins as I get. I'm not going to make you guys jump up and down and massage each other, any of that kind of stuff. But all right, everybody, let's reach for our toes. 1, 2, 3, hakalau! All right, 15-minute break. So when we left, we were talking about abundance being a mindset. I'll tell you, in my life, this was a big realization for me was, I can remember being 20, 21, almost 22 years old. And I remember at the time I was a security guard. I was making $6 an hour as a security guard. It was more money than I'd ever made in my life. And then, so once I got the hourly rate, then it was like, how can I keep myself 40 hours a week? Just trying to get the hours, getting them to schedule me. But I remember at the time, I was 21 years old. I had a, 1-year-old baby boy. His mother wasn't working, so I was basically having to pay for everything and then try to figure out how to pay for, a place for me to live and everything else. And I remember thinking at one point, like, something's got to change. I didn't necessarily know what was going to change. I didn't know how I was going to change it. But there came a point where I just knew I was at that crossroad. I could either keep going the way that I was going, or I could do something different. And, I was looking at my life at the time because, I'm highly ADHD. I barely scraped by in high school. Not because I'm dumb, although I thought I was dumb in high school because I thought that your grades determined whether you were dumb or smart. But I just didn't fit the mold. I was too hyperactive to sit in a class that long. Interestingly enough, I would go through the regular year, and I would usually fail a couple courses, and then I would go to summer school, and I would ace summer school. I would excel at summer school because it was an accelerated format. It was rapid. It was different. It was more engaging. The topics were usually more fun. And so I would make up for it in summer school, and then I'd go to regular school, and I would suffer again and then make up for it in summer school. So, just barely scraped by in high school. And I was looking at, what were my prospects? I didn't have the money to go to college. I didn't have the time to go to college. I had to work because I had a baby support. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I just knew I needed to do something different. And, I remember hearing this thing that if you put a rubber band on your wrist, every time you have a bad thought, you just whap yourself on the wrist with the rubber band. And so I started doing crazy stuff like that. And I started thinking to myself, how can I change? There's a old Tony Robbins recording that talks about the power of questions and how asking the right questions can actually change your life. The fact is, most of us ask the wrong kind of questions. Most of the time we ask questions that are why questions. We have kind of a rule in NLP that why never matters. As you're going to find out when we get to the time technique session. The why almost never matters. And if you ask yourself why, most people when they ask themselves why questions, it's things like, why can't I do this right? Why am I so stupid? Why won't this work? And the fact is that your subconscious mind is an answer machine. Your subconscious mind will answer almost any question you give it, right? It'll answer almost any question you give it. So if you're asking it, why am I so stupid? It's going to tell you why it thinks you're stupid, right? Which is not very empowering.
It's fruitful
It's hurtful, right? So what we need to do is we need to start to switch to ask more powerful questions, and that's what I did. I stopped asking why questions, right? The why stuff was why I thought I was on the street, but all that was doing was anchoring me to all the old stuff. It kept anchoring me back to these old feelings and these old stuff that I hadn't resolved yet. Once I started to ask how questions, how-based questions, my mindset started to shift. Instead of asking, why am I stuck making $6 an hour, I had to start asking myself, how can I make more money? I started asking myself how questions in my life. The very fact that I started doing that began to change some of my mindset. I started looking for opportunities that I didn't even know existed before. I looked at my life and I went, what am I good at? I don't have a college degree. I'm not heading for college anytime soon. I thought, what am I good at? And the one thing that I was really good at was computer programming. When we had the natural disaster at 9 years old, my parents put me on an airplane, flew me to California. And my grandparents, so my grandparents could take care of me while they tried to clean up, my grandparents didn't know what to do with me. So they stuck me in the Radio Shack computer camp. I spent 3 months over the summer learning how to program. Anybody remember turtle graphics? You had a little turtle on the screen. You say forward 10, turn right 90 degrees, forward 10, and you draw squares and triangles and all that kind of fun stuff. I learned how to do that, and I learned how to program in BASIC. And BASIC is really one of the simplest programming languages that you can learn. And so throughout my teenage years, I took all the computer courses that I could get in junior high and high school, and I would make games for myself and my friends. And so I was pretty good at programming. I didn't know a ton about programming for business, but I knew enough of the structure of programming. So I started asking myself, how can I get a job as a programmer? Because when I went through the paper and looked at the classified ads, programmers were making like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, right? And I was making like 12, So I kept asking myself, how? By asking myself the how questions, I started inching myself closer and closer. I actually activated a part of the subconscious mind called the reticular activator. It's a part of your brain that searches your environment for answers. So every time I said, how can I become a computer programmer, my subconscious mind is looking around in my life going, how can I make this happen for him? Right? Unbeknownst to myself, I actually started employing my subconscious mind to make me successful rather than sabotage me, because you get what you focus on. So by asking myself this question over and over and over again, I actually became obsessed with it. The funny thing is, before that, if you'd ever asked me if I wanted to work a day job, if I had ever wanted to wear a tie, if I ever wanted to sit in a cubicle, my answer was hell no, right? I liked my security job where I got to drive around in a truck from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. with no boss looking over my shoulder. I actually liked that. But I knew I had to do something different. So I kept asking myself these questions. When I first started applying to real professional computer programming jobs, my experience at Radio Shack for 3 months wasn't good enough on my resume. There was nobody willing to take a chance on me. They all said the same thing. They said, you don't have experience. And I said, well, I need to get a job so I can get experience. And they said, well, you can't get it here. Right? It was that old catch-22. So I got rejected a bunch of times, and I started thinking to myself, what can I do? How can I get experience without anybody hiring me? And I figured it out. I said, I'm going to start my own company. And I'm going to make my own product, and then I can put on the resume that I worked for my own company, and then they'll hire me. So I had actually written a program, just a little utility program for myself, and put it on my grandfather's machine. My grandfather looked at it, he said, this is amazing. It's, when Windows 95 came out, they removed a feature from Windows 3.1. It was the ability to copy and move files. Microsoft didn't want you to do copy or move anymore. They wanted you to drag and drop. So you have two windows open, you'd drag a file or you'd copy a file, that way. And I like the old way where you'd say copy, and it would say, where do you want to copy it to? And you'd pick a directory and hit copy, and then it would move it, right? So I just made that program. And I stuck it in the little send to menu on Windows, so when you right-clicked on it, it would say send to, and then I called my program anywhere. And so I had just written this program. My grandfather said, this is amazing. Why don't you put it on the internet and see if anybody wants to buy it? And I went, aha, there's my company. There's my product. I've already written it. Put it out on the internet. I actually never expected it to be successful. As far as I was concerned, it was just something to put on my resume. that I had successfully created a commercial product and marketed it on the internet. I didn't think I'd sell any. But I put it out there, and the funny thing is, about a week later, I came home, opened up the mailbox, and there's an envelope in there from South Korea. I'm like, what is this envelope? It was from ABC News in South Korea, which was even more interesting to me. And when I opened it up, there was a handwritten note inside that said, I'd like one copy and a $10 bill. Luckily, it was a US $10 bill. I was blown away. Somebody actually bought my program online. That actually, it significantly increased my mindset. So I delivered the program to them, and then a few days later, I got another envelope. And a few days later, I got 2 envelopes. And these envelopes started coming in, right? So on the one hand, it's like, I only did this thing just as a way. It was a how question for me. How can I put something on my resume that gives me experience so that I can say I've got experience? And so I started building that. Very quickly what happened was, I applied for a job. There was a place that had advertised for a programming job. I went in, I said, here's the experience I've got. I said, I've written my own program, I've marketed it online, here's the name of my company. That's all I had. I had Radio Shack Computer Camp down in the footnotes, and that I've been doing it that long. And I went in, and I remember sitting down, something my mom told me when I was a teenager that really stuck with me. I remember when I first started going out and applying for jobs, I got a pizza job. One of the things she did is she looked at me and she said, Michael, when you go out and interview, I want you to remember this one thing. You are the prize. You are the prize. Because you can go out and get 1,000 other jobs, but they can only get one of you. And I remember sitting in this interview thinking this. I was 22 years old, just waiting for somebody to give me a break. And I sat down in the interview, and I'd been working on my mindset, and I'd been working on my confidence, and looking him in the eye when he asked me questions, answering confidently, things like this. And what happened was probably my perception was halfway through the interview, he goes, wait. He stands up and he walks out of the room and closes the door. And so I'm kind of sitting there going like, what's going on? Where did this guy go? I thought we were in the middle of an interview. And he's gone for 20 minutes. And I'm sitting there, I'm kind of thinking like, am I being punked? What's going on, Where did this guy go? Comes back in the door, he sits down, he says, I'm going to hire you. And he says, I want you to know I had to go to bat for you. He said, my boss told me no, told me I couldn't hire you, and I stood my ground and I told him that you're the guy. And he said, I want you to know I'm hiring you over people who have master's degrees in computer science. I'm hiring you over people that have 20 and 30 years of experience in the field. He said, but I think you're our guy. And he said, basically, ultimately, when I asked him why he was hiring me, he basically said, you have the right mindset. And that was a huge shift in my life for me. Because I several times multiplied my income. And I started doing something that, for me, really opened up a door for me. It enabled me to take care of my son the way that I wanted to. It enabled me to work regular hours, to have enough money to take care of him, to have insurance, which I couldn't have paid for as a security guard. And what I did was, it's another little thing my mom taught me, was always be interviewing. My mom said interviewing is a skill that most people lack. And that's why most people, they work at a place for 10 years, and when they get laid off or they get fired or the company goes out of business or whatever, they're terrified and they don't know how to interview. So she always taught me, even if you don't need a job, always interview once or twice a month. Because you'll keep your chops up, and it never hurts to have an offer in your back pocket. So I did that. And the interesting thing about it was, because I was interviewing all the time, because I was staying confident, because I was not nervous. I had no nerves whatsoever in interviews. I was just always interviewing, right? So what would happen was that I would go in, and I got to the point where my attitude was almost like, I'm interviewing you to see if I want to work for you, right? And because the funny thing is, I had no investment in it. I actually wasn't looking for another job. It was practice for me. So I had no nerves, no doubts, and it was almost flipped over. So what ended up happening was I worked at the first place for about 2 years, and one day I was going to do, looking through the classified section to try and find an interview to do, and there came up an interview for this opportunity. And it was twice as much. I was being paid being offered for twice as much as what I was making. I didn't think I would get it. So I just went into practice. I got interviewed by 2 guys at once, which was really interesting. I felt like I was being kind of almost like grilled by, police officers or whatever. I had one guy on each side of me. But I was totally calm and totally cool, and I had no neediness whatsoever. By the end of the interview, they said, "We think you're our guy. We want to hire you." And I didn't expect that. So when I left the office, I had to really start thinking about it. Is this the job that I want? Like, do I really want to take this opportunity? How could I not? It's double the money. So I went back that afternoon, made the decision, took the offer, switched jobs, doubled my income. About 6 months later, I was doing my usual thing, opened up the newspaper. There's an offer in there for a job that was not even something that I really specialized in. Decided to go do the interview. Why not? What could it hurt? See, the funny thing about it is when you take all that investment on it, there's no such thing as failure, right? I went in there expecting not to get the job. So there was no nervousness, no neediness, nothing like that. So I went in and I sat down and interviewed for this position. And the interesting thing, it was in a language that I didn't have any professional experience in. I'd learned it at home. Didn't really have any professional experience. Told them I didn't have any professional experience. But when I went through the interview, at the end of the interview, he says to me, what's your salary requirement? And by this point, I'd actually started to learn a little bit about hypnosis and, influence and these kinds of things. And one of the things they say is always have a specific number, right? This is a good influence tip for you guys. If you're asking for something that requires a number, always use a specific number. Don't just use round numbers. So at the time, I was making I think it was $52,000 a year. And I walked in, and he said, what's your salary requirement? And I looked him in the eye, dead in the eye, and I asked for exactly double what I was making. And he sort of blinks, and he looks at me, and he goes, that's double what you're making right now. And I said, yeah, but I'm doing some side stuff. I've got my computer software company on the side. I'm doing contracts. I said, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. So I want to make the same amount of money I'm making on this plus my contracts and quit the contracts. I didn't think he'd ever say yes. But he did, doubled my salary again. And I'm not saying this to brag or anything. What I'm saying is it all came back down to a mindset, right? My mindset when I went into those interviews was so different from everybody else's, right? No neediness, no nerves, not being scared. There was no desperation like there is for a lot of people when they go in for a job. And that absolutely affected my results, right? So I had an end result. I knew what I wanted. I asked for it, but I had no negative mindsets around that. That was a huge shift for me because I know where my mindset was several years before that, and got me $6 an hour. So you're what you think. Oops. The fact is, if you want more abundance in your life, then you must learn to tap into and to harness the subconscious mind. Must learn to tap into and to harness the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is waiting. It's one of the things we're going to talk about later during the event. Your subconscious mind is a servant. It loves to serve you. Loves to serve you. It's just waiting for you to give it instructions. Most people just don't give it clear instructions, right? Or the instructions they give it are really clear, but they're negative. Hope I don't drop the drinks, right? So we really got to learn how to focus on what we want. It's a big part of this weekend. So let's talk about some principles for success. The keys to attaining the success you desire are these. Number one, the first thing is this: continual growth. Tony Robbins often talks about this principle of continual growth. Next one is this: keeping an empowered peer group. Keeping an empowered peer group. I feel like, these days most people, actually there's a great statement I like that James Malinchak says. If you have a fish, like a betta fish or a goldfish, and that fish gets sick, how do you treat the fish? Do you take it to the fish doctor? Do you get little fish prescriptions and give the fish injections and give it a special diet? How do you treat a fish if it gets sick?
Flush it down the toilet.
That's if it dies. That's only if the fish dies. Or if you're my mom, you bury it in a little cigar box in the backyard with it. Fresh water, who said that? Fresh water, right? If you have a fish that's sick, you don't treat the fish, you treat the environment. The only reason that fish generally get sick is because their water gets dirty. When you change the environment, you change the fish's conditions, change its health conditions. The same thing is true in your life, right? Whatever tank you're swimming in your life is going to dictate your results to a large extent. I think it's Tony Robbins that says, if you want to be a millionaire, stop hanging out with thousandaires, right? Not that thousandaires are bad people. There's no judgment about people who are like that, but sometimes we move to a different mindset in our lives. I know, for instance, years ago when I wanted to quit smoking, I was a 3-pack-a-day cigarette smoker, smoked 60 cigarettes a day. These days, that would be almost $20 a day. Cigarettes are $6, $6-something a pack these days. I smoked 60 cigarettes, which generally means that I had to chain smoke one cigarette off another when I could. So I remember when I wanted to quit smoking, one of the biggest challenges that I had was that I would quit. I'd crush my cigarettes, throw them away, I'd say, I'm never going to smoke again, and then I would hang out with my friends. And there were a few friends who were those kinds of people that would be like, dude, you're being crabby, just have a cigarette already. You know you want one, just have one, you know you're not really going to quit smoking. Why don't you just, stop playing games and have a cigarette right now? And the funny thing is, I thought those people were my friends, right? Even then, even when they were doing that, my feeling at the time was that they were friends. But looking back on it, I realized that's not what friends do. Real friends don't sabotage you when you're trying to do something in your life. Real friends don't try to, cut your legs out from under you. They don't try to do those kinds of things. Real friends, when you want to do something in your life, they support you. They love you. They encourage you. Okay? And I had to realize at that moment that if there was a time that came where I said, if I really want to be a non-smoker, then I'm going to have to distance myself from those people. This is the only way that I was going to get any traction, was distancing myself. Does it mean they're bad people? No, not at all. Some of those people I'm still connected with on Facebook. I don't spend time with them though, right? I don't think they're bad people. I just moved to a different mindset. Or in some cases, I wanted to move to a different mindset, so I chose a different peer group. So keeping an empowered peer group, a community, is, I think, one of the foundational ways of changing your life. I remember years ago, I made a conscious effort to put myself around people who had more success than I do. I think a lot of times people have a hard time doing that because this ego thing kicks in, where we go, I want to be the most successful guy in the room, right? But sometimes it's better to put yourself around other people. Henry Ford, somebody asked him once what a secret to success was. He said, I always make sure I'm the dumbest guy in the room. The people that he would hire to work for him, he always hired people that were smarter than him. Whereas a lot of times business owners will hire people that aren't smarter than them because they want to feel like the top dog, right? So he would get his ego out of the way and he would hire people smarter than him, and that's an empowered peer group, right?
Same with Walt Disney.
Same with Walt Disney. Absolutely, yeah. Next is planning. When it comes down to it, if you don't plan for success, you're planning to fail. We need to have some form of planning in our life. And most people just don't. I get people all the time, they go, oh, Michael, do I really have to write down my goals? And I look at people and go, listen, if you won't spend 45 seconds writing down your goal, do you really deserve that outcome? Really, if you're not willing to do even that to get it, do you really deserve it? It doesn't take us a long time to write down our goals or to plan steps out. But if we don't do it, what will happen is we get overwhelmed because our conscious mind can't handle all the steps all at once. Conscious mind's only 126 bits, right? So we got to, work on some planning in our life. Next is accountability. I really feel like we humans just generally lack accountability these days. People these days, if they say they're going to do something and they don't, it's like, I didn't get around to it, or I was busy, or something came up, or I couldn't find a dog sitter. That's probably one of the biggest excuses I hear these days, by the way. We had people that wanted to come this weekend to this event because they needed their lives to change, but couldn't find a dog sitter. Which is funny because I've had a lot of dogs and we usually just leave them at home with a bowl of food. They manage, right? Dogs are pretty good at managing with that. But people will come up with almost any excuse these days, and we don't hold ourselves generally accountable. And so this is one of the big things you'll find with people who are highly successful. They have people around them who keep them accountable. When they make a decision, when they say something, there's people who will hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. This is actually, if you look at the Weight Watchers, this is one of the things that I think makes Weight Watchers pretty successful. For the people who choose to go to the live meetings, they have to show up every week and stand on a scale in front of all of their peers, right? This is a huge component of motivation. They don't want to show up one week and stand on the scale and be 2 pounds heavier than they were the week before in front of all those other people. There's a measure of accountability there that a lot of other weight programs don't have. So accountability is huge. And then next is perspective. We, by our very nature, are locked inside a box of our own perceptions. So when we're stuck in a problem, for instance, when we've got a problem in our life that we can't figure out how to solve, it's like we're stuck in a box. And no matter how much we try to think around it, no matter how much we try to outwit the problem, the fact is, if you're stuck in your own mindset, no matter which direction you look, if you're stuck in the problem, what are you going to see? You're going to see the problem, right? Because you're in it. Now, is there a solution to any problem that could ever exist? Absolutely. We live in a law that has, we live in a universe that has this thing called the law of polarity. Law of polarity states that everything has its opposite. Everything. If we have an up, we have a down. If we have a left, we have a right. If we have a hot, we have a cold. There is nothing in this universe that doesn't have its opposite. The same thing is true with your problem. Okay? If you have a problem in your life, no matter how complex the problem is, whatever the opposite of the problem is a solution. Right? Whatever is outside the box, possible solution. But when we're stuck in the problem, we can't see any of this stuff. We can't see any of these solutions. You ever have somebody that comes to you like a friend and they're like, oh, I've got this problem and I can't figure out what to do, and they're tearing their hair out, and you go, why don't you just do this? It's like so obvious. Why don't you do this? And they go, you don't understand, right? Or don't tell me about my problems, right? Or they say, this is the one that comes up all the time, they go, well, I already thought of that, that won't work. Okay? And you can see that it clearly works, but because they're in their own box, they just can't see the solutions. So what we need in our lives is we need a way to get perspective. We need a way to get perspective, to get out of our own box. And then finally, the last thing is action. Most people, I hate to say it, it is not in humans' nature to act. There's a great quote that I love from Les Brown, actually a story that Les Brown tells. I'll probably talk about it later too, about the howling dog. This guy's walking down the street, he hears this crazy noise. Oh! He can't figure out what the noise is. So he keeps walking, it keeps getting louder and louder. Closer he gets, the louder it gets. Oh! So he finally walks up and there's this house. And he looks over and there's this hound dog sitting on the porch, just howling its eyes out. Oh! And he looks at the old man sitting next to the dog and he goes, why is your dog making that noise? And the old man goes, he's sitting on a nail. And he says, well, why doesn't he get up and move? And the old man says, it doesn't hurt bad enough yet. And that's most people in their life. Yeah. Most people will whine about it till they're blue in the face, but they don't actually do anything to take action. So taking action is, I think, one of the biggest success principles. A lot of people who are, fans of The Secret, this is one of the big things they left out of The Secret, right? Was take action. They said ask, believe, and receive. Somewhere in that formula, there's got to be action taken. So let's talk about these. Let's chunk down on these individually. Continual growth. Successful people are relentlessly focused on improvement, right? It's a focus on excellence. Many of the most successful people have an obsessive focus on make it better. This is, one of the things when you look at Ford. Ford was always trying to figure out a way to make cars better. A lot of people don't realize this with Ford. He gets credit for inventing the assembly line. Right? He didn't actually invent it. He just brought the idea from a different industry. Ford, before he retooled his shop to be an assembly line, Ford could only output 5 cars per month. 5 cars, that's only 60 cars a year. Now, at the time, the demand for cars was really growing. They had to figure out, they were basically had at the time, they had one mechanic that would build an entire car from the ground up. So they had 5 mechanics who could build 5 cars, and it took them 30 days to do it. Well, Ford was always looking for solutions that were outside of his own box. He was always going and looking at, interestingly enough, most people don't think about this. He didn't go to his own industry and look at other auto manufacturers because they were all doing the same kind of things he was doing. He went outside of his industry. He took a tour of a meat packing plant in Chicago. And what he actually witnessed wasn't an assembly line, it was actually a disassembly line, right? Because they would start with a cow carcass that was on a hook, and it would go down the line, and they would have workers at every station on the line, right? The carcass would continue moving, and there was another one right behind it, and another one right behind it. And essentially what would happen was, there was one person whose job it was to get the filet mignon. There was one person whose job it was to get the ribs. One person whose job it was to get the prime rib. Every person that worked on that line had specialized knowledge, right? They had a specialty, as opposed to what Ford was doing, where he had a mechanic that was a generalist who could kind of work on everything, but never really got good at doing one thing. Okay, it's that old statement of, are you a jack of all trades or an ace at one? So Ford watched this whole thing going on and realized that not only did every employee get better at what they did, they got faster at it. And so there was this continual production that was going on from, open until close every single day. So the very first thing that Ford did is he went home. He started thinking about, how can I make what I'm doing better? How can I take this idea and make it better? Shut down the Ford Motor Company, retooled the whole thing in an assembly line format where they would start with a chassis and every mechanic had a certain thing that they were doing. By the end, with the same 5 mechanics, was producing 50 cars per month, right? A 10 times multiplier. But the biggest thing was that Ford was always looking at, how can I improve? Relentlessly focused on improvement. The Japanese culture has a principle called Kaizen. Kaizen is a focus on constant and never-ending improvement. Constant and never-ending improvement. This is one of the biggest things you'll find as a success principle with highly successful people. They're never, ever resting on their laurels. Almost any time they accomplish something, they're going, what's the next thing that I can do? How can I make this better? Look at Richard Branson. Virgin Mobile, Virgin Airlines. Airlines wasn't good enough for him. Now he's got to go, Virgin Galactic. And Richard Branson is one of those people that is always looking for, how do I refine this? How do I make it better? Matter of fact, most of Richard Branson's companies are wildly successful until he sells them. And Virgin Mobile was one of those examples. Richard Branson sold the company. It's like they lost their soul. They lost their purpose, their drive, and the company just went like that. Because they lost their focus on, how do I make this better? This is what I call a focus on excellence. See, most people focus on perfection. And the problem is that people will say, I'm not going to do it until I know I can do it perfect. Well, that's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? Matter of fact, I remember when I went through my very first certification course for hypnotherapy, I went out and saw my first client 4 days later. But I know people that went through that class that said, well, I don't feel comfortable enough yet. I'm not confident enough yet, so I'm not going to see clients until I know that I can do my sessions perfectly. And they never did. How would they ever expect to do a, quote, perfect session without any kind of practice? If they're not actually taking action and implementing what they learned, I don't know how they ever expected to get anywhere near perfect, but the thing is, perfect is fake. Perfect is, it's an ideal. As an ideal, that means it's not real, right? Because we're all imperfect, right? Exactly. The fact is, perfection may be something that you can do occasionally, but it's not something that can be produced consistently. And the fact is, a lot of times what you find in producing something imperfect is that it's perfect the way that it is. We wouldn't even know if we got locked into that perfection. Yeah? Yeah. Uh-huh. Wow. Absolutely. Well, and especially with a tool like EFT where you can't do harm with it. Why not? You know, and I love, you know, Gary Craig, who invented EFT. If you're not familiar with EFT, it's energy tapping, right? This is where you tap on the energy meridians of the body, same thing that you would do with acupuncture or acupressure, except you don't use needles. You just tap on your own body. And it's a really simple procedure, and Gary Craig, who invented it, is an NLP master practitioner. And he went and actually modeled it from, essentially from another field that was like acupuncture or acupressure. But you know, one of the things that people ask him all the time, they go, Gary, you know, what does it work on? What does EFT work on? His answer is always the same. Try it on everything. Well, does it work on migraines? Try it on everything. Does it work on back pain? Try it on everything. Does it work on cancer? Try it on everything. If it's a tool that you can never do harm with, right? You can't ever unbalance your energy by tapping on points. It can only ever do good. Why not just try it? You know. But here's the thing: is that by not focusing on perfection, instead of focusing on perfection, if you focus on excellence, excellence means you are always focused on doing your personal best, or outdoing your personal best. Right? So if every time you take action, you're focused just on beating yourself the last time that you did it, then that's a focus on excellence. One of the common threads that you'll find among virtually all successful people is that continual growth, that focus on excellence. Next, let's talk about empowered peer groups. Jim Rohn famously said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time around. I think there's a ton of truth to this. Harv Eker puts it a different way. He says, show me your 5 closest friends' salaries, and I can calculate your salary within $5,000. And it's true. You know, people who make $30,000 a year tend to hang out with each other. It's not because they tend to hang out with each other that they make $30,000. It's not because they make $30,000 a year that they tend to hang out with each other. But in most cases, it's the reverse, right? It's the fact that they hang out with each other that tends to cause the results that they get in their life. Your peer group is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do. If you do nothing else to change your life, simply putting yourself around an empowered peer group will make dramatic changes in your life. Because one of 2 things happens. When you elevate your peer group, for example, if you, like I did, start putting yourself around people who are more successful than you on purpose, one of 2 things will happen. Either they will raise your vibration, right? They'll raise your mindset up, or they won't let you hang out with them very long. True story, right? I mean, if you just kind of like try to drag your old mentality into the new group without trying to change at all, they're probably not going to deal with that for very long. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I happened to change my peer group on accident. I was trying to supplement my income as a security guard. I took a day job doing door-to-door sales. I was selling, they were essentially gift certificates for Goodyear. You know, two free oil changes, a free tire rotation. We were selling it for $21 door-to-door. And I'm telling you, man, I've never worked a job that was more of a threat to my self-esteem. Door-to-door sales is the worst. I had people call me names, throw things at me, call the cops on me, like chase me out the building. It was crazy. But the funny thing is, the people that I worked with there, the people that I was training with were kind of the superstars. They were the people that were like gung-ho. They were all like, every day they would get together and they'd do a sales meeting at the beginning of the day to pump themselves up and get all excited. And I got injected into this group and I didn't change my mindset. And you know, it's funny because about a month into it, they basically said, we'd like you to go train with this other group because you're just so negative, right? I didn't even feel like I was a negative person, but compared to them, I was pretty negative. So they basically kicked me out into a different group. That's what happens if you don't improve your mindset. Tony Robbins says if you want to be a millionaire, stop hanging out with thousandaires, right? Find people who have, and this is talking about money, but it doesn't just have to be money. Isn't it funny how single people hang out with single people? Not just single people, but unhappy single people, right? You get those group of girls that always go out with each other and they're all dancing with each other on the dance floor and they're all unhappily single. They're hanging out with each other. Don't you think that if you want to be in a relationship, maybe you should go hang out with people in relationships? It would probably help you change your focus, right? What about, health and fitness? People who are unhealthy tend to hang out with the other people who are unhealthy, whereas the people who are healthy tend to hang out with each other. So what if you started hanging out with people that were healthy the way that you want to be? What do you think that would do?
Motivate you to help empower you to do better.
Absolutely. Because we tend to want to live up to what we hope other people are thinking of us, right? We want to live up to what they think of themselves when we hang out with that peer group. So it's really important, I think, to put yourself around a peer group. So 2 reasons why a disempowered peer group can hold you back. Number 1, they won't inspire you. So if you're hanging out with a disempowered peer group, they're not going to inspire you at all. When I was hanging out with smokers, I wasn't really inspired to quit smoking. I was just inspired to be like them. The second thing is that you'll fear their judgment. And this is something that I dealt with quite a bit when I was younger. Was most of my friends, when I first started making the transition, going from $6 an hour security guard to making my first jump was as a computer programmer was $28,000. I was being wildly underpaid at the time. Computer programmers were making like $60,000 a year, but it was my foot in the door. I took that salary because it was they were the people that were willing to take a chance on me. And so, I went from $12,000 a year to $28,000 a year. And I remember thinking at the time, like, what are my friends going to think of me? What are they going to think of me? There were even some of my friends who would make digs. We'd go out to dinner and they'd go, yeah, the rich guy's going to pay for it tonight. Right? Rich guy, $28,000 a year. But that was the perception. So if we're putting ourselves around a disempowering peer group, then we will often fear their judgment, which will prevent us from taking action. It's one of the biggest fears that people have about becoming wealthy. They don't want to lose their friends. They don't want to lose their family. For some reason, there's this perception, if I get rich, either my friends and family won't want me anymore or they'll want something from me. 2 of the biggest things that hold people back from attracting money into their life. So we got to get rid of this, right? Not necessarily get rid of the people. I'm not necessarily saying cut them out of your life, but we get to choose who we spend the most amount of time with. If you start gravitating toward people who have the kind of success that you want in any area of life, spending more time in that peer group, then you'll tend to attract that in your own life. There are also 2 reasons an empowered peer group will drive you forward. They'll either hold you to a higher standard, and they will hold you to a higher standard, and you will crave their approval. We human beings, we tend to want the approval of other people. Not necessarily a bad thing unless you're doing it,
Addiction.
Unless, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But if you put yourself around that empowered peer group, and see, here's the thing that I found, is the more and more that I sort of level up my peer group, in the past I had friends that didn't want me to be successful. They would always cut me down, right? And I don't think they were doing it consciously. I don't think they were trying to be mean to me. They just didn't know how to deal with my growth, right? But now the peer groups that I put myself around, they want to see me grow. I put myself around people now, and this has actually become my standard for friendship. I didn't used to have a standard for friendship. My definition of a friend used to be somebody that I knew for a length of time. So if I knew somebody for like 6 months, they were an acquaintance. If I knew them a year, they were a friend. If I knew them for 5 years, they were a good friend. If I knew them and it didn't matter the content of the relationship in between, it was just the length of time that determined the label. I didn't know any better. So there came a point where I had one friend that I had for about 14 years. And I called him a good friend. I called him my best friend. And then I looked back on the history, the content of the history, and I realized that I had an eviction of my credit because of him. I'd loaned him money over the years that never got paid back. He lost his license for a year, and I was the guy that showed up practically 5 days a week to say, like, if he wanted to go out or whatever, I was the guy that gave him a ride. But if I ever needed a ride, he was absent, right? And so it was like a one-way friendship that was going on, and I finally had to look at it and say, I need a new definition for what a friend is. I need a new definition for this because it just wasn't working out for me. So I finally realized that in my life, I had to create a standard for what a friendship means. I think you should have a standard for who's allowed in your life. I think you deserve that. What's my standard? It's nothing more and nothing less than I'm willing to give out to others. I support my friends. When one of my friends wants to do something like write a book or do something amazing, I'm that person that's there going, you can do it. I know you can do it. I can't wait to be the first person to buy your book. I like to be that person, that's first person standing in line with the money saying, I want a copy. And so I want those kinds of people in my life who will support me the same kind of way. Emotional support. I'm not saying they have to do things for me or give things to me or buy things for me, but emotional support. And I think when you put yourself around that kind of empowered peer group, amazing things happen. This is a great picture of an empowered peer group right here. This is a picture of the vagabonds. These guys, I'm going to talk a little bit on late Saturday or early Sunday too. These guys were, I think, one of the most empowered peer groups out there. This is a group that was started by Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. And the vagabonds would get together every year, and they would literally leave society and leave their jobs to dissociate from, there's something to be said about, a lot of times when you go to like a motivational event, they'll do it in Hawaii. Anybody know why they do it in Hawaii or Fiji or Tahiti or places like that? I mean, obviously the appeal of the islands is nice, but there's another reason why they make you fly somewhere else when you go to a transformational seminar. Isolation, right? Getting you away from the disempowered people in your life so that they can isolate you and help you change your mindset. It's a big part of the reason why they do these retreats, on islands and things like that. Well, that's exactly what these guys were doing.
In nature, too.
In nature. Yeah, there's pictures of them at the pyramids of Giza, and they would go all over the place. So this was Henry Ford. It was Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone. There were 2 sitting presidents that were part of the vagabonds over the years. And what these people would do, they would get together and they would calculate each other's success, right? They would get together and say, how can I support you? And they would round table on how they could support each other. Think of the web of support, right? If you end up with like 6 people around a table and one person says, how can I support you? How can I support you? How can I support you? And then the second person says it, and then the third person says it, and the fourth person says it. Imagine the web of support that creates. These people were not millionaires and billionaires by accident. They weren't lucky. They created that success. They got together in meticulously calculated ways to create success, not only for themselves, but for everybody else in the group. And this was the concept in the book Think and Grow Rich of what's called a mastermind. When Napoleon Hill documented this, and he talked about the power of like-minded people coming together, what it does is it adds an exponent to your success, right? There's this thing that's often said, I hear all the time, when people talk about success, they say, it's lonely at the top. You ever hear anybody say that? Oh man, the more successful I get, the more lonely it gets. And what I like to tell people is this: if you think it's lonely at the top, you're not on the right peak. Because this is real success over here, and real success is filled with supportive people. What I've found is the more that I put myself around successful people, the more support that I get. The more that I put myself around people who aren't threatened by my success, they're happy for my success. And that creates such a different dynamic in your life when you have that kind of support group. When you have that kind of energy behind you. And that kind of person that you can pick up the phone and you can call and you can say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. I'm struggling with something. And they'll talk you through it instead of cutting you down. Right? So, empowered peer group, I think one of the most important things. Next is planning. You cannot succeed in life without a plan. I'm a firm believer in that. Really, the only way that you could have success without a plan is what we call an accident. I don't know that I would call an accident success. It may look like success, but winning the lottery is not success to me. Not necessarily. It's money, right? May give you a chunk of money, but can we really call it successful when somebody wins the lottery? Your subconscious mind is a servant and it needs your instructions. Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting. That makes perfect sense now. Like with the lottery, if it is a success by accident, you can really say it's a curse in disguise, because if everybody loses it, rather than it being a blessing, it could be a curse, because if you're way worse off than before, then...
I think most people who win the lottery would call it a curse. I mean, from some of the stuff that I've read, these people literally, like a large majority of the people who lose the money are suicidal at the end of 2 to 5 years. Yeah.
We had a feature on that on, I think, Nightline a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
And 70% of the people who win big money, it's gone in a few years.
Yeah. I've read by 5 years, it's 87%. I mean, that's
off before they have the money, too.
that's practically 9 out of 10 people, you know? So that's one out of every 10 people still has some money left over after winning the lottery. Goes to show the power of mindset, right? Because these people just weren't energetically or you know, they weren't programmed for it. So your subconscious mind needs instructions. I don't necessarily think that the lottery is a curse. I think the way that most people receive it and what most people do with it becomes a curse for them, for sure. How they handle it, that's exactly right.
What comes at them after they went in.
Yes. Oh yeah, people talk about the fact that, you know, like old friends come out of the woodwork, old exes, like everybody wants something from them.
Sob story.
Yeah. Which is interesting because, and we're going to talk about this during the main course, it is a possibility that when you get more success, people are going to want something from you. But the solution to that is boundaries, right? And I think what happens is a lot of times people win all this money, they don't have boundaries. They don't know how to tell people no. And so they end up giving out money. You know, that's one of the biggest reasons why people lose all the money is they give loans to people that they know and they never get paid back. And they make bad investments. That's the second reason. So your subconscious mind needs instructions from you. If you give it no instructions, your subconscious, and think about this, like if you had a ship, a sailing ship, and the captain just disappeared off the ship, what would the crew do? You know? Or if the captain locked himself in the cabin and didn't answer the door, what would the crew do?
Sink the ship by accident.
Maybe. I mean, eventually they're going to mutiny, right?
Titanic.
Yeah. Kayla and I were just in Puerto Vallarta, and they have this cool little pirates thing that you could take. It's like a cruise ship with a dinner, and they do this pirates show. And there was a mutiny on the ship, right? It was part of the show. And what happens in a mutiny? The crew usually splits in two, and they fight each other. Okay? This is often what happens when we ignore our subconscious mind. Your conscious mind's like the captain. Your subconscious mind's like the crew. So if we're ignoring our subconscious mind, if we're not telling it what to do, then at some point the crew is probably going to mutiny. Sometimes it mutinies just to try to get your attention, right? But you can't predict how the crew is going to behave because you're not telling it what to do. You could have the most obedient crew in the world, which your subconscious mind really is. But if you don't tell them what to do, who knows what the outcomes are going to be. So instructions are given to the crew through these three things: pictures, sounds, and feelings. Detailed pictures, sounds, and feelings. If you want to be a millionaire, this is actually a great example of that. Anybody ever heard of Esther Hicks? Yeah, she does speaking on the law of attraction. There was a seminar where a woman came to the microphone and she basically said, I want to be rich, I want to have $1 million. I've done all my planning, I've done my vision board, I'm meditating on it every day, I'm doing all the things that they say you should do to attract $1 million into my life, but I'm broke. What's going on? And essentially what Esther said was, if you want $1 million, feel like you have it now. Feel like you have it now. She said, by feeling that you have $1 million, you'll create the space in your life for $1 million. And I think essentially what I think she was saying is to make the pictures, sounds, and feelings of that wealth. Because one of the things we know about the subconscious mind is that whatever you program it for, and we program it through our pictures, sounds, and feelings, your subconscious mind will take you to it. We're going to talk about later during the course your subconscious mind being like a railroad track, right? The railroad track could go to poverty town or it could go to wealth town. It really doesn't care. The track doesn't care which direction you're going. It just needs the instruction from you, right? Which track are you going to put the train on? How are you going to flip the switch? Is what it comes down to. We flip the switch with the pictures, sounds, and feelings that we hold in our mind. So I think what Esther was saying was this: if you want to be a millionaire, you need to see, hear, and feel the wealth. You need to see, hear, and feel the outcome of having $1 million. Okay? Now that's a money example, but it could be anything. If you want to lose 50 pounds, you need to see, hear, and feel yourself 50 pounds lighter. If you want to be in a loving relationship, you need to see, hear, and feel yourself being in love with someone. The problem is that most of us don't look at that. What do we focus on when we think of, like, I want to be a millionaire? What do we usually focus on?
Yeah.
Empty bank accounts, not having it. We focus on the obstacles, right? It's really hard getting rich. Or we focus on a limiting belief or whatever it is. We don't focus on the end result necessarily. Most people, just like this, when they're holding that tray of glasses, they're not focusing on putting the glasses on the table safe and sound. They're focusing on the challenge of the journey. They focus on the obstacle. The obstacle is I might trip on something, right? Now, you might not trip on something, but people don't make a picture of that in their head. They make a picture of tripping. So it's kind of interesting how usually what most people are doing is they're really programming their future for failure. Just by even thinking of those glasses falling over and breaking, we're now giving that instruction to the robot on the mind. So we've got to start shifting our mindset, thinking about the outcome instead of the obstacles. So learning a method for managing your time is paramount. One of the biggest reasons why people don't succeed is because they have no method for managing their time and their what's the word I'm thinking of? Their time and their tasks. Thank you. Time and tasks. Actually, I just had a coaching member that we were dealing with this. Basically walked away with a bunch of instructions and didn't do anything with it. It was one of the biggest challenges. Couldn't figure out how to get started. They just had too much information. So one of the things we had to do was actually to chunk it down, break it down into very simple steps. Right? Most of us, what happens is we look at the big picture of things. $1 million, oh my God, that's huge, that's too confusing. And we shut down because we don't know the first step to take. Or we don't commit dates and we don't plan things out. So learning a method for managing your time is paramount. Would you guys like to have a method for managing time and tasks?
Yes.
Awesome. One person? Okay, good. Good. My favorite is what's called the Getting Things Done method, often abbreviated GTD. Getting things done. This is a time management method that was created by David Allen. And it's written in a book called Getting Things Done. Good book. I would suggest reading it even after learning the method here. Very good book. I'll tell you, I'm highly ADHD. Very typical, hyperactive. My attention goes 4 million ways. Kayla always laughs at me because, I'll start working on something and then I'll work on something else and then I'll work on something else and I'll open like 5 or 6 loops and then I go, wait a minute, I thought I was doing this. And then I'll go back to that and then I'll work on, and I'll go through them again and I'll go, I thought I was working on that. And I'm constantly, if I don't use a time management method, if I'm just using free time, then I get so out of order. So I in particular need something like this in order to keep me on task. Okay? So the Getting Things Done method is really simple. Essentially what it says is this: every task that you have at the subconscious level that is not finished, that is not complete, is like a spinning plate. Okay? It's like a spinning plate. Remember those gypsies that used to spin plates on sticks? You'd see them sometimes at the bazaar shows, whatever, and they get one spinning on their foot, and they get one on their chin, and they got all these plates spinning. So you can imagine, if you're spinning one plate, probably not a big deal. You spin 2 plates, gets a little bit more complex. 3 plates, now you got a lot to pay attention to. 4 plates, you got one on your chin, one on your forehead. Every time you add a spinning plate, your attention gets fractured, and then not only that, your energy gets fractured, right? There is a certain amount of energy that is stolen, really stolen from your mind for every incomplete task that you have on your mind. And I don't mean consciously on your mind, I mean unconsciously. Does that make sense? I see some of you squinting to look at the screen. So let me see if I can blow it up a little bit for you.
Will we be able to get these on PowerPoint if needed?
I don't usually give out the PowerPoint, but
Or maybe a copy of that picture.
yeah, I think we can do that. Yeah. Or you can draw it on the back of the sheet too if you want to do that. So essentially, the getting things done method helps you get these tasks out of your head. One of the things David Allen says is that every incomplete task drains your energy. This taps into something we call the law of momentum. Law of momentum says that incompletions drain your energy while completions replenish it. Okay? Incompletions drain your energy while completions replenish it. So in the beginning, before you've ever done this, you may have a million things in your head that you think need to get done, or 1,000 or 100 or however many tasks that maybe you haven't even thought of. So what David Allen suggests is the very first time you do this, to spend as much time as possible on this method. As a matter of fact, he suggests maybe taking like 4 days off of work and going and renting a cabin in the woods to just get like everything out of your head. We have so much noise going on in our heads these days. We're just so bombarded with news and media and responsibilities and all kinds of stuff. I think we have a noisier probably mind than anybody before us. So we got to get that noise out of our head and get it into a system you trust. And that's the biggest thing. It's got to be a system you trust. If you don't trust it, your subconscious mind will fear it's not going to get done and will keep spinning the plate. Does this make sense? Right? So what you want to do is you want to create a system where when you take the task and you put it in the system, your subconscious mind goes, phew, I don't have to think about that anymore because I know I'll get to it now that it's in this system. Okay? So the getting things done method can be done several different ways. It can literally be done with, you notice right here there's an inbox, which is where everything starts. It could literally be done with a wire basket called inbox. You could have wire baskets for each one of these buckets here, or you could have piles of paper. You could have sticky notes on a window, right? The system doesn't really matter. It's kind of system agnostic. I use an app on my phone. Kayla and I use it, and it syncs between the two of us, so it's very cool. And it's called Pocket Informant. So Pocket Informant is available on the App Store if you want to use an app for it. I'll tell you right now. I think you could download it for free and then they do it in in-app purchase if you want to upgrade. Actually, since I already purchased it, they're not telling me how much it is. I think it's $12.99 on the App Store. But it's a great app because it's actually designed for this method. Okay? Designed for this method. So here's how the getting things done method works. Every task or project that you need to do needs to come out of your head and into a system. So you could write, a project down on a piece of paper, you could write a task down on a piece of paper, and then it goes into the system. You could even start with wire baskets when you first start. Everything comes out of your head, goes in the system. The more you get out of your head, the more your subconscious mind goes, whew, don't have to think about that anymore. Now, when it first goes into the system, it's just sitting in an inbox. An inbox literally means it's not even processed yet. Okay? Your inbox could be, in my case, my inbox is on Pocket Informant. So every time I think of a task, like for instance, I have to print manuals for next weekend's course. I pick up my phone, go into Pocket Informant, and I say print manuals for next, for Influence to Profits course, and I hit save into the inbox. Now I haven't scheduled it yet. I haven't broken it down into steps yet. I haven't done anything with it, but I've gotten it out of my head. That's the first step. Okay, get it out of your head. You want to ask yourself when you get it out of your head, what is it? What is this task? Is it actionable is the first question you want to ask yourself. Is it actionable? In other words, can I do something with it? Can I take action on it? If the answer is no, this is actually one of the most brilliant things about the getting things done method. If the answer is no, it's not actionable, then it goes into one of three places. It either goes into what's called a tickler file. This is like my someday pile. It goes into my someday. Someday I may get to this, but not now. That's what's called a tickler file. Or if it's just a piece of information, something that maybe like an article that I want to save, or a link to a website that maybe someday I'll need, it goes into a reference file. The reference file is just a bucket for information. Or if it's not actionable and I'm never going to get to it, it's not ever going to happen someday, trash it. Trash. I tell you, trash is one of those liberating things ever. I talk about this a lot with my coaching members that there's three processes I think that are really important to do in your life. Automate, delegate, and eliminate. Right? We just have too much junk. And we have physical junk and we have mental junk. So to me, that trash bucket is actually one of my favorite things to do, because once it's in the trash, it's never in my head again. It's just gone. Okay? If I'm never going to do it, if it's never going to happen, there's no reason for it to take up rent in my head. It's out of here. Okay? If it is actionable, then we keep going and dropping through. The thing you want to ask yourself is, what is the next step, or what is the next action that I can take on this thing? Now, sometimes what you'll find is that actions are immediate. So like, for instance, printing manuals for next week's course, all I have to do is to hit Control-P on my keyboard and print them out, or go to Staples and have them printed. It's a one-action thing. But other times, I may look at it and go, it's, for instance, my task that I'm working on may be finishing my book. Well, finishing a book is not a one-action thing. That's going to take multiple days. It's going to take multiple steps, because I have to write the book and I have to edit it and I've got to get it published and all that stuff. That's what we call a project. Okay? So if it's a multiple step project, you go back through and you do this for each step in the project. In other words, chunk it down into steps. Okay? Each one of those steps, then you'll run through the rest of the thing. So the first question you want to ask when you say, what's the next action, is this. You have 3 steps for every action step. 3 options, I mean. The first thing is this. If it takes less than 2 minutes, stop what you're doing and do it. This is one of the biggest mistakes that people make in time management. The thought is this: I'm in the flow right now. I don't want anything to distract me. And so what you do is you spin a plate with a 2-minute thing. And then another 2-minute thing comes up and you go, no, 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 I'm focused. 2-minute thing. Another thing, I'm focused. And people don't want to break their focus, and so they let all these plates start spinning. David Allen says it's actually far better for you to stop what you're doing and just knock it out and get it off your plate completely. Okay? So no matter what you're doing, if it takes less than 2 minutes, stop what you're doing and get it done. Because then you don't even have to schedule it. You don't have to task it out. Spinning plate now goes back on the stack. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay? This has been one of the huge things for me. It's just getting the 2-minute stuff done the second that it comes in. Just done. The second thing you can do is this. If you can't do it in 2 minutes, delegate it. You can delegate it. Send it off to somebody else. Okay? This could be an employee, could be a coworker, it could be a family, a friend, whoever you think can do the job that's willing to do it, delegate it to somebody else. Now, while that's happening, it's going to go into the delegation pile, which is waiting for someone else to do it. Now when you're waiting for somebody else to do it, you don't have to spin the plate because it's out of your hands. You're just waiting for a response. Does that make sense? Okay. So goes in the in-communication system, and it just waits here, and you track it and wait for a response. Finally, the last thing is this. If you have an action and you can't do it now, and there's nobody else to do it, then you have to do it, but you got to defer it. And so this is where it goes into the calendar. Okay. So if it's for me to do on a specific date or time, I put it in my calendar system. And usually Kayla puts it in the calendar for me because she speaks calendar better than I do. But so for instance, I know I need to print the books on Thursday. I can't print the books today. I can't take 2 minutes to do it right now because I'm speaking. So Thursday, the day before the class, I've got to print those manuals. So that goes in my calendar at a specific date and time on Thursday. Now sometimes, like in this case, you're going to set up a specific date or time to do it, but sometimes you've got those actions that you don't really put a date or time on. So like for instance, I had one of those people that still writes checks. I haven't written a check in I can't tell you how many years, but we have a client who writes us checks every month, paying for her, one of the trainings that she took. So when she writes a check, that check sits on my table or it sits in my wallet, usually for a week or two, because I don't schedule time to go to the bank. It's usually out of my way. I don't want to take time out to do it. And so that goes into the next actions pile. Okay? If you have something that you don't necessarily want to schedule time out of your schedule to do it, you're going to do it the next time you have a hole, basically the next time you have a hole. Okay? That goes into next actions. Next actions are basically the things when you've got nothing else to do and nothing scheduled on your calendar, you look at your next actions pile and say, what are these odd tasks that I have to do that didn't warrant me scheduling them? Does that make sense? Okay, so like, taking the check and cashing into the bank is one of those things. taking the trash out, things like that. Those go into next actions. And that's it.
Does the waiting for have a date component on it too?
It can, yeah. So like if I delegate it to Kayla and I say, Kayla's got to get back to me by Tuesday, then I'll set an alarm on my phone that says Tuesday, check in with Kayla if I haven't heard from her yet. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's it. And I'll tell you this, it's the simplest thing in the world. It's one of the things I actually like about it. There's more complex task management systems out there, but most of them are so complex that they're too hard to use, right? Or like, you have to hold a big day timer, and, buy an expensive day timer with $200 inserts in it and things like that, I love this because it's so simple to use. This, for me, has revolutionized my task management. I add one more component to this, and it actually gets added up here before it actually gets into stuff. For me, especially with business tasks, then what I do is I think it's the old Franklin Covey system, which is A, B, C, and D. So what I'll usually do is I'll start off with my tasks on Post-it notes. I stick them up on either a mirror. We actually have a project board. I have like one of those science trifold project boards that you can stick up, and I have all my projects on there in sticky notes under A, B, C, and D. And so what I do is A, for me, this is the top priority stuff. This is the stuff that needs to go in the inbox ASAP. Right? It needs to get processed right away. Usually in business, this is the stuff that's going to lead to cash, right? That's going to lead to like a direct income. If I do this, then X number of dollars are going to flow into the bank account. B is usually important stuff. C is it's usually sort of like the someday pile. And then D is usually eliminate. It's either eliminate or it's the stuff I'm probably never going to do, And then what I'll do is I'll put all the sticky notes up so that all my A's, all my B's, all my C's, all my D's, and then I know which ones go into the inbox first. So I sort of pre-prioritize all of my tasks before they go in there. Does that make sense? So I combine those two things together. Everything goes on a sticky note up on a board first, and then once I've got them organized in A, B, C, and D, I basically rip through all the A's and put them in the inbox and process them first. Then I go through all the B's, and then the C's go into the someday pile, the D's go into the trash. Make sense? Good. Now, the hardest part about this method is remembering to use it. That's really the only hard part about it, because it is such a simple method to do. But I guarantee, I promise you, if you guys start using this method, you're going to get great, great, great results. So the idea is to get every single task out of your head and into here and scheduled. At that point, it either gets scheduled, deferred, or put into the next action. Or if it's not actionable, it goes up into those. And there's a beauty, there's like a real quietness that happens in your mind when you get all that junk out of there. I'll tell you, I can really tell when I stop doing this, when I'm laying in bed at night and I'm like, oh God, tomorrow I've got to do this thing, and oh, Thursday I've got to do this. And you ever have those nights where you're laying in bed and you can't fall asleep because you're thinking about all the stuff you have to do over the next few days? That's when I go, I need to do getting things done method. And the next morning I'll get up and I'll just start throwing all that stuff in the inbox. Because that's what happens if you don't have a system you trust, your subconscious mind just loops on all the stuff you think you have to do. But the minute you get it out of here and you know it's in a system that works, you can sleep easy. Your mind gets quiet, the gears stop turning, you sleep a lot better at night. Okay, good? All right. Let's see. What time do we take our last break? Started at 1, 2:30. All right, so we're just about on time for a break. So any questions on this? Any questions on the method at all?
Can you go to davidco.com and get a copy of this?
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I really suggest, obviously this is the shortened version of it, right? This is just the flow chart. I do suggest you go get the book, Getting Things Done, and really look at what the thinking is that goes behind this. David Allen will tell you that he really doesn't care what system you use. It could be paper, it could be Post-it notes, it could be an app, whatever. But it's the thinking that goes behind this that's so important. So highly recommend the book Getting Things Done. And for those of you squinting at the screen, I really recommend the book Take Off Your Glasses and See. it's
What was the name of that app again, please?
Pocket Informant.
That's a serious comment you just made.
Yes. By the time, Take Off Your Glasses and See by Jacob Lieberman. By the time that I was 28 years old, my vision was so bad that I couldn't read clocks, couldn't read street signs. I wouldn't be able to read what's on the screen from here. Everything was a fuzz. And but I remember in my teenage years, I just made this decision that I was never going to wear glasses. Everyone in my family wore glasses, and I said, I'm not going to do that. I've always had this belief ever since I was a kid that glasses make your eyes weaker. And I never knew where that belief came from, but I was really firm on that, and I said, I'm never going to wear glasses. And so when I was 28 years old, I actually had to start rethinking that, because it was getting to the point where I couldn't drive at night. I literally would have to, like, if there was a green light and I couldn't see, I'd have to pull over to the side of the road and get close enough to the sign to be able to see it. Anything that was backlit or glowing was worse. And like when I'd look at the moon, I'd see two moons. There was the moon, and then there was another moon around it that was like fuzzy. And it was just really bad. And somebody recommended that I read that book, and then another book, which I can't remember the name of. But Take Off Your Glasses and See is the one that I really liked. And Jacob Lieberman is a double doctorate. He's an ophthalmologist and an optometrist. I don't know the difference between the two, but he's both. Oh, is that the difference? But basically what he said is the belief that your eyesight will get worse with age is false. It's a myth. Now, a lot of people's eyesight does get worse with age, not because it's true, but because they don't take care of their eyes. And you do have to take care of your eyes. Your eyes are flesh and muscle, just like any other part of your body. But because they're a different kind of flesh and muscle than everywhere else, they need a very special nutrition. So you need things like grapeseed extract and lutein and pycnogenol and different vitamins and minerals. And he says that your eyes need exercise. Anybody here ever had a broken arm? How long did you have your cast on for?
Oh, shoot, I think it was like 5 months.
5 months, that's a long one. Okay, so when they took a cast off your arm, was your arm stronger or weaker?
Oh, it was skinny.
Skinny, right? So what happens when we put our arm in a fixed position for a long time? It loses your muscle density, you atrophy, okay? Think about it this way. Most of us, we go to work, and for 8 hours a day, we put our eye in a cast. We're looking at a fixed focal point. We sit down at a screen that never moves closer or further away. We never have to change the focus of our eyes. For 8 hours a day, our eyes are basically in a cast. They're locked. Then we go home, and we sit at a different fixed focal point called the TV, and we never move our eyes. So essentially, your eyes only have two places where, for the most part, they're spending all their time. And it's just like putting a cast on your eyes. So he's got 9 exercises that you do. The one that really did seem like it did the most for me was you hold your finger like this in front of your face. You focus on your finger, then you focus on something far away. Then back to your finger, then back far away. And you're only allowed to do it as quickly as you can actually focus back and forth. So in the beginning, it was like, it was so hard for me to get the muscles to, go back. It literally took seconds for me to focus on my finger and then focus on like a stoplight. I used to do it at red lights. And you focus back and forth. Then there's other ones where you go all the way around the orbits of your eyes and you do 9 different exercises. But what happened was within about 6 months, I really started to notice a difference. And by a year later, I was back to 20/20 vision. I've never worn contacts, never worn glasses. He says that glasses actually make your eyes weaker. Imagine putting a robotic arm on that helped you lift weights. Would your arms ever get stronger? Of course not. So when you put lenses on, that's exactly what it's doing. Those, yeah. So they call them corrective lenses, but they don't correct your eyes. They just make them worse. So what happens is you continually go in for worse and worse prescriptions. Yeah.
Say when you started talking about the finger, visualizing behind it.
Yeah.
Not after you visualize it. When you're going through rifle training in the Marines,
Mm-hmm.
United States Marine Corps, they have that sort of training added to it.
Yeah.
Because you're looking through a little peep sight, then you're looking at the front sight post.
Oh yeah.
So first thing you target on is your target in the back,
Uh-huh.
your visualization, and then you're targeting on that little tiny front sight
Ah.
post, covering that entire small area about 500 yards away.
Wow, interesting. So you have to be good at doing both.
So once you get that most of the Marines are able to hit their targets at that larger distance. The,
Interesting.
223 realm.
It's interesting because interesting you brought that up, because one of the modeling topics that was done in NLP, one of the modeling projects, was they modeled the U.S. Army sharpshooter team, the competitive sharpshooters, and talk about the power of beliefs. On the sharpshooting team, just like on any team, there was, everybody was good enough to qualify for the team, but there was a few people that really stood out head and shoulders. So those are the ones they modeled to find out what they were doing differently. And one of the biggest excuses that people on the team had for not hitting the targets, two excuses. Number one, they'd say the sights were off. It wasn't my fault I didn't hit the target, the sights were off. And the second one that they had was the trigger's too heavy. So when they were trying to pull the trigger, they said it was pulling the gun down, and that's why they were missing the targets. So one of the things they found, though, was the opposite. With the people who were really excellent at sharpshooting, their belief was that the sights were always right. So instead of trying to complain about the sights, they would adjust their own. They would adjust themselves. But the second thing they did, for all the men that were complaining the trigger was too heavy, they brought in the best woman sharpshooter in the world, and they had her shoot in front of the guys, and then none of them complained about the trigger being too heavy again. But it was really funny because those two mindsets were two of the biggest things that were limiting their results. But yeah, so the book's called Take Off Your Glasses and See. Jacob Lieberman is the author. And I'll tell you, I got off of the nutrition and the exercise probably 10 years ago. And I'm just now starting to notice my eyesight starting to get fuzzy again. So it's time for me to go back and read the book and practice it again. But the good news is when I first read it, he had all these recommendations for vitamins, and you had to get all these different vitamins and everything. Now they actually have commercial vitamins that you can get. The one that I use is called Ocular Nutrition. Yeah, I think it's called Ocular Nutrition. They sell it at Mother's. So you can go right into Mother's now and just buy a bottle of vitamins for your eyes, which is pretty cool.
What is Mother's?
Mother's is it's like a vitamin shop, health food store, Mother's Market. You probably have something similar.
Costco sells AccuView, similar to like
AccuView at Costco, yeah. Yeah, or like if you went into a GNC vitamin store, any place like that, yeah. Okay, no other questions on this? Good, let's go ahead and take a break. It is 4:05. We'll take a really short break, 10 minutes. Be back here at 4:15, and then we'll finish up the last segment. Everybody, let's stand up and stretch, and we'll do a hakalau. Oh, okay, everybody reach for your toes. 1, 2, 3, hakalau!
Not too much.
All right. Let's look at the next slide. We'll talk about accountability. Get this zoomed back out here. This is a big one, I think. I feel like this came up during one of our mastermind sessions last year. I feel like people have lost the definition of commitment. People these days, when they quote commit to something, it's as long as nothing else comes up, as long as it's convenient, as long as it doesn't hurt or cost me anything, whatever. What is the real definition of commitment? Do what you say you're going to do. My definition that was taught to me when I was a kid was these 3 words: no matter what. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. No matter what. Even if it's inconvenient, even if it turns out not the way you thought it was going to turn out, whatever. When you commit to somebody, even when you commit to yourself, you really get it done. And this is, I think, a big thing. See, here's the thing. Accountability is like a muscle. I think that when you haven't had accountability in your life, you just don't have it. But once you start to get accountability in your life, it becomes a muscle. You become more accountable the more you hold yourself accountable to things, right? It becomes more of an automatic kind of a thing. I think it's one of the biggest missing factors in people's lives today. The definition of commitment, no matter what. The problem with accountability is this: if you're like most, it's hard for you to be accountable to yourself. We let ourselves off the hook. So if I say, if I'm writing, right now I'm rewriting one of my books, and if I say I'm going to write 15 minutes a day for the next 7 days, if I don't do that next week, what am I likely to say? Oh, well, didn't get to it, right? I mean, that's what we humans are kind of like. We just don't tend to hold ourselves accountable. So the mistake that often people make is this, though, allowing family or friends to be our accountability partners. I'll tell you this, I'm a firm believer. I've done a lot of relationship coaching over the years. And I'm a firm believer that one of the things that keeps relationships healthy, that keeps relationships functioning in that just real pure love phase, is boundaries on roles, right? When for instance, Kayla and I, Kayla's my wife, I'm her husband. When Kayla and I first got together, one of the things I told her, because she was fascinated with NLP, a little scared about it and fascinated at the same time, she started asking me questions, and one of the things I told her right off the bat was, I will not do NLP with you under any circumstances. Because at the time, I said I'm your boyfriend, not your therapist. I'm not your coach, right? So when Kayla finally got curious enough that she actually wanted to experience NLP, I hired somebody else to do a session with her, just so that she could get a feel for it. Because I've learned over the years that relationships have a very definite boundary around them that says this is everything that we are and everything that we're not is outside that boundary. The minute you let stuff start creeping into the relationship is when the relationship changes, usually not for the better. So, generally what I find is when we blur those lines, we let, other roles in, it starts to fundamentally change the relationship. And I remember a woman that I dated before Kayla, it was one of the rules that I had with her too, that I wouldn't do NLP, hypnosis, none of the stuff that I do. I said I wouldn't do that with you. We dated for about a month, maybe 5 weeks, and then one day she calls me on the phone, she's crying. And she says, I really need your help. She had this thing go on with one of her family members, and she said, I really need some help with this. And I did a very, very simple technique with her over the phone. But, 5 minutes. But I'll tell you, like the next day, it was different. And then she had this other thing that she wanted to work on, and can you help me with this, and can you help me with that? And it changed so quickly, and that ultimately was part of what ended up to that relationship ending. So I'm a real firm believer when you have those relationships, like for instance, your spouse. It's not your spouse's job to keep you accountable. And if they are keeping you accountable, then generally what happens is it devolves. It devolves into what feels like nagging. May not be nagging, but it tends to feel that way, right? So this is one of the reasons why I think it's really important to separate out, get any kind of accountability partner, wherever you get them, but just don't, especially close family. I know people all the time that, they're having their spouses try to coach them or their spouses try to keep them accountable and things like that. And it's a surefire recipe for stress in a relationship. Next is perspective. One of the things you're going to find out this weekend as we go through the course is this. Your reality is not based on what's real, but rather a filtered version of input from the world, from the external world. Notice I put reality in quotes. As we're going to talk about a lot this weekend, what you think is real is not real. Your subconscious mind, your mind in general, tends to filter things that are just data. It's nothing more than data that's going on out here. It's just information. As we receive it through our neurology and through our mind, we tend to filter it and we tend to attach meaning to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that thing means what it means, right? The example I always use is if you take two people and put them on a beach, looking out at the ocean, with their toes right on the waterline. Maybe one person is a surfer and the other person had near drowning experience. Those two people looking out on the ocean are going to see two totally different things. Okay? The surfer's going to look out, they're going to see fun, they're going to see recreation, they're going to see spirituality, they're going to see connection with Mother Nature, the thrill maybe, whereas the other person's going to look out there and just see terror. Get me away from that thing, I want nothing to do with it, right? Now those two people are looking out at the same exact stimulus. They're looking out at the same information or data. It's just water. Water doesn't actually mean anything until we perceive it and attach meaning to it. And then we project that meaning out as if it's reality. So one person goes, that's fun, and the other person goes, are you crazy? That's scary. They're both looking at the same thing, but they have two different perspectives on it. And the nature of our perspective, though, is that we are somewhat locked in this box. This box is your 126 bits of reality. I get people all the time, they go, well, if all these are the solutions and the other perspectives, can't I just make my box bigger? And I say, sure you can if you'd like to have autism, because that's what autism is, right? Autistics are, the filtering system is broken in autism. So autistic kids are literally receiving all of the input that's coming at them. It overwhelms them and they shut down. Okay, so you don't want to make your box any bigger. Right? But what you do want to be able to do is you want to be able to shift your box around to get different viewpoints that you might not normally have. There's a couple of different ways to get perspective. Well, first of all, your filters are unique to your mental process, to your emotional and your physical state, as well as influences from your past and your future. All of those things actually influence your filters, how you experience reality. Okay? Often these filters are a prison. They prevent you from experiencing alternate realities, which in fact are all real. There's a great illustration of this actually. A Tony Robbins video where Tony was doing a Date with Destiny event in Hawaii on 9/11/2001. And I think they had about 3,000 or 4,000 people in the room. And Tony came out on stage and said, I'm sure you've all heard the news. Tragedy has happened. And Tony's not the kind of person that goes, hey, we just had a bad thing happen, everybody leave. He's basically said, stay here in the room. Who wants to talk about this? He said, is there anybody here that has anything to say about this? And the first man that raised his hand was an American of Pakistani origin, American Muslim. Stood up and he took the microphone and he said, I'm not saying America deserved this, but America had it coming. And you could hear like 3,000 people in the room go, ooh. And Tony says, fair enough. Is there anybody here that has anything else to say? And there was a white Jewish man from New York that stood up. And he took the microphone and he said, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. We're the most generous country in the world. We help everybody else. We do this, we do that. These are two people that were looking at the same event happening in the world and had completely different experiences of it. And so one of the interesting things about it was Tony actually had them both come up on stage, sat them chair to chair, knee to knee, eye to eye with each other, and for about 45 minutes went through a process of them talking to each other about each other's perspectives, right? And it was just so amazing watching these two men that came from two different worlds, two different religious backgrounds, two different value systems, two different belief systems, that couldn't agree at all that they were looking at the same event. They just couldn't agree on what happened. And by the end of it, not only could they see each other's perspectives better, but they did a follow-up with them a year later. Those two men became best friends. Right? Who would ever think that a Pakistani Muslim and a Jew would become best friends? Right? But they did. And they figured out how to elevate above each other's differences and to respect each other's perspectives. Right? Didn't necessarily mean that they bought into or believed or switched their own perspective, but they learned how to get out of their own box and to at least appreciate the perspective of someone else. But perspective is so hard. There are some people they never make the effort to get out of their own box. Right? These two men, if Tony wasn't there, if they were in a bar drinking together talking about 9/11, they might have ended up in a fist fight, right? Because they wouldn't have let go of their own beliefs, their own perspectives. But by coaching them on how to change their perspective, or at least get out of their own box a little bit, it really helped them open up and see things in a different way. So it helped them get out of that prison, right? Now the fact is, of those two men, one man saying America had it coming, and one man saying America is the best country on earth, which one of them was right? Both. Yeah, the answer is both. Which one of them was wrong? Both, as long as they were invalidating the other person's reality. Right? Because when we invalidate another person's reality, we're wrong. Because it may not be real to us, but it's real to them. Reality is subjective. Every person has their own individualized reality, which is true and right and verifiable to them. Right? So we got to learn how to get out of our own box. Not necessarily just to even communicate and connect with other people in this situation, but a lot of times when we have a goal in life and we want to accomplish something, we come up against an obstacle and we think it's impassable. Right? Sometimes we hit an obstacle and we're like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I just had one of my coaching members call me up. And he's been coaching restaurateurs. He's worked in the hospitality business for a long time, and he's got some really great, unique ideas about how restaurateurs can grow their business. especially using new media like social media, Facebook and Instagram and things to grow their business. And so he started coaching restaurateurs for about a year and a half. Excuse me. And ultimately what he said after a year and a half was that there are two reasons he didn't want to do it anymore. Number one, there aren't a lot of restaurateurs. It's a small pool to be in. But number two, he said they're all stuck in ego. They all think they know the way that it is. They won't listen to the coach. If you ever watched John Taffer on Bar Rescue, or who's the other guy? Gordon Ramsay, when he goes in and does the rescues on restaurants. I mean, you could see these guys are so stuck in ego. They know they're doing it the right way, even though all the results tell them it's wrong. And they don't want to let go of what they're doing. And so he finally decided he wanted to switch to the hospitality industry in general. He wants to speak to hotels and other, hospitality businesses. And so he calls me up on the phone. He says, I know I want to do this because I'm not sure I can pull it off. And I said, why not? He said, I'm too young. This kid's 24 years old. And so his roadblock that he came up against was, these people that run these hotels are in their 50s and 60s and sometimes even 70s. Why would they listen to a 24-year-old kid? And this is the thing, is that based on the box that he was in, based on the of his reality, he was stuck and couldn't figure out how to get past it. In his mind, they were never going to listen to him. And just one of the things that I pointed out to him was, listen, you've got something that none of them have, which is this. Baby boomers are retiring or dying, right? Depending on which part of the baby boomer area they're in. The millennials, the Gen X and the Gen Y kids, these kids which nobody understands, right? They're so unique. They are going to become the new clients of these hospitality businesses in very short order. They're already becoming the clients. Not to mention they're going to become the co-workers and at some point probably even the bosses of some of these people. And I told him, I said, there's nobody out there speaking on this. There's nobody out there speaking on how do we as a hospitality business serve millennials, Gen Xers, and Gen Ys and work with them. And I said, you don't realize it, but the thing that you think is your biggest weakness is actually your biggest strength. At which point he got really, really excited, right? Because there's nobody out there right now speaking to all the baby boomers who are running these hotels and hospitality businesses on how do you communicate with these, in a lot of cases, the baby boomers sort of reject Gen X and Gen Y and millennials. They don't get them. They think they're lazy and they think they're, not motivated and they think all these things about them. They need to learn how to embrace these generations in order to serve them and eventually work with them and maybe even work for them at some point. And so this is a whole mindset that he can bring to hospitality nobody else is talking about. Now, that was an alternate reality, right? What he thought was his biggest obstacle turns out to be his biggest strength now, because we were able to shift that box and move it. By shifting the box, we let go of a limiting belief of his, we created new empowering beliefs, we opened up a new potential for him. Now he's got a whole new angle. Does this make sense? Okay. Both beliefs could have been real, by the way, because reality is so rich. Not even reality. The data that's out here is so rich that you can create almost any reality from it. It's like this huge palette that you can pull any paint from and put on the canvas. We just have to learn how to shift our reality to paint the picture of life that we want. Okay? Almost any situation in life has a different perspective. We just have to learn how to get it. So we need to escape that box in order to grow. So I'm going to share with you a great NLP technique that will help you do this. It's called perceptual positions. Perceptual positions essentially says that in your mind's eye, in your mind, you can take any one of at least 3 perspectives on any situation in your life. Okay? Any one of at least 3 perspectives in any situation in your life. The 3 perspectives are this. The first one we're really familiar with. It's called first perspective. First position is in your own body, looking through your own eyes, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear, and feeling what you feel. This is how we typically live life, right? So we're very familiar with first perspective. But one of the things that few of us ever do is go second perspective. This is that old analogy, walk a mile in another person's shoes, right? So the exercise in NLP is to literally imagine floating out of your own body and into another person's body. whoever the other person is in the situation. I often have people do this with arguments. When you have an argument, you're really pissed off at the other person because they won't see your way and you won't see theirs. To literally imagine floating out of your body, turning around, floating into the other person's body, seeing what they see, hearing what they hear, feeling what they feel, and believing what they believe. Looking back at yourself. And experience the situation from that second perspective. It changes things. It can't not, right? By looking from the other person's perspective and through their filters as best as you can, it has to move that box so that you experience something different. Does that make sense? Third perspective, or third position, I like even better, is to imagine you're floating out of that second person and floating into a completely dissociated third party. Okay? It could be an innocent onlooker who has nothing to do with the situation looking in, or the way that I like to do it is imagine that you are a security camera on the wall, or a security camera on top of a pole if it's outside. Okay? So if you could imagine floating into the security camera, looking through the lens of the security camera, above it all, down onto the situation, it further changes the filters. It changes the filters that you use to experience reality. This is one of the simplest NLP techniques, but it's something you can do just like this, right? So quick. I'll oftentimes have people that are in an argument with another person. I'll have them close their eyes and spend 30 seconds in position 2. Just 30 seconds looking back at themselves. And it'll change the way they feel about the whole situation. Or 30 seconds up in the camera. Okay? So I really encourage you guys to do this as kind of homework. Take a situation that's troubling you. Yeah?
Can you go over one again, please? The first one?
One is just your own perspective. Yeah, so it's looking through your own eyes, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear, feeling what you feel. Yeah, I usually don't have people spend a lot of time in one because you already know your own perspective. That's where your box is already situated, right? So I'll have people go into position 2 and position 3. This is a great way for you to shift your perception so that you can get a different perspective on things, okay? People often ask me, they say, is it possible to coach yourself? And I'll say this, it's difficult to coach yourself, and one of the biggest reasons is because of your box of reality, right? But this is one of those tools that can help you get a little bit closer. I don't personally think that there's anything better than having another person coach you because, can you imagine how long that coaching member of mine would have struggled with that? Maybe even given up because he would have just gone, I'm just too young, and never would have gone forward with it, right? So oftentimes having somebody else outside your box is the easiest solution. But being able to shift it yourself, I do this for everything. I do this when I'm marketing. When I'm writing my website, one of the things that I do is I float out of my body and I float into the body of one of my customers. And I'll be sitting there at the website looking at Transform Destiny as one of my customers, seeing what they see, hearing what they hear, feeling what they feel, reading the text as one of my customers would, or a visitor to the website, right? This gives you the ability to see things in a very different way. So very cool technique. So that's your homework for tonight, is to try that with one situation in your life. Next is action. Action, most successful people are action takers. This is one of the big differences between successful people and everyone else. Oftentimes, they say showing up is 80% of the success. I think it's action is oftentimes 80% of success. Even people with a bad plan, if they take action, can be successful. But if you had the perfect plan and didn't take any action, you probably will never be successful. So this is one of the big things. Successful people fail their way to success. Successful people fail their way to success. There's a great quote from, who was it? I think it might have been Bruce Lee, that said, I'm successful because I'm willing to fail more times than you even try. Right? I'm willing to fail more times than you even attempt. Most people are, like I said before, most people are so afraid of not hitting the bullseye, they never take a shot at the target. So the more action you take in your life, the more results you're going to get, period. It's just a law of the universe, cause and effect, right? If you take action, you're going to get results. Most successful people take action, or as Les Brown says, leap and grow your wings on the way down, right? Think about how, baby birds in the nest, they've never flown before. They may not know if they can fly, but that mother bird pushes them out, makes them take action, and it's only because of that action that they become successful in flying, right? So sometimes you got to leap and figure out how after you've leaped. In NLP, we believe this. There is no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. We don't believe in the word failure in NLP. Failure, for most people, is final. People think they failed and then they quit. The second problem with failure is that most people take it as an identity. I'm a failure. So instead of saying it failed, people will take it as I'm a failure. And then once it becomes an identity, they quit. In NLP, we just believe there's feedback. Feedback says what I just did either worked or it didn't work as I wanted it to. Once we incorporate that feedback, we can take different action if it didn't work and we can succeed. So it's all about just feedback, not failure. If everything is learning, then everything is growth, right? Think about it. Every time you learn something new, you grow. Who was it? I think it was, I don't remember who said it, but there's that phrase that says once the human mind has been stretched by a new idea, it never goes back to its original shape. I think it was Buckminster Fuller that said that. So every time you learn something new, you're growing yourself. And if you've learned from something, how could you ever call it a failure? To me, learning is one of the highest forms of success. Even if I didn't get the result I wanted to, if I learned from it, then I succeeded. Okay? There's a great quote that said, I never lose, I either win or I learn. Powerful. Successful, this was a big thing. There was a study that was done of highly successful people, and they looked at interviews from them from over the years, and one of the things they found was this. Highly successful people associate to their wins and dissociate from their losses. So when you listen to their language and you watch their body language, they'll lean forward when they talk about a win, like a real estate deal that went really well and they made a lot of money. They'll lean forward and they'll say, yeah, I did really well on that. I closed that deal. But if it's a loss, they tended to lean back and they say, it didn't go well, or it didn't work out. Notice the difference between the language. When it's success, it's I. When it's not success, it's it. And so what they found was one of the key differences with successful people, they were taking the positives and bringing them into themselves. In other words, developing their mindset, spiraling this way. But when something negative happened, they would dissociate from it so it wouldn't pollute their mindset. Does this make sense? Right? So they would own their wins and they would disconnect from their losses, in other words. And that turns out that's a very common trait of highly successful people. Abundance is everywhere. We're going to talk about some beliefs that will lead to more abundance, and then we'll close out. Abundance is everywhere. Most commonly, I'm telling my coaching members, my clients, people like that there is cash everywhere. There is cash in this room. It's stacked up. There's cash in the bathroom. There's cash in the hallways. There's cash in your house. Imagine stacks of cash stacked almost all the way up to the ceiling everywhere that you go. You're like bumping into it. You're walking through. You're practically swimming in it. But most people, their mindset isn't tuned to see it. Okay? Their mindset isn't tuned to see it. One of the most common traits of entrepreneurs is the ability to see money almost anywhere. They look around in their environment and they go, money! And they figure out a way to get that money, right? By producing a product or a service that serves people. So I love this story. This is a story of a little red paperclip. That's an actual picture of the paperclip. There was a man in Canada who wanted to try an experiment. Craigslist has this section called Things for Trade. Right? You can sell stuff on Craigslist, but this section's different. You post a picture of something, you say, I'm willing to trade this. Who has something that you're willing to trade for it? So he decided to post a picture of a red paperclip. Now, how much is this paperclip worth? If we just look at the components of the paperclip, the metal, and it's a fancy paperclip. It's got a plastic coating on it with color. What's that? Less than a cent, probably a fraction of a cent, right? So the paperclip really isn't worth anything, is what most people think, because most people look at the raw materials when they judge things. Okay? This guy thought differently. He put this picture up on Craigslist. He said, I want to trade my red paperclip. Who's got something to trade for it? He almost immediately, the same day, had somebody answer him back, and they said, I've got a pen. I'll trade you for your paperclip. It was a pen shaped like a fish. So he traded the paperclip for the pen. What do you think he did with the pen? Put it back up on Craigslist. I've got this pen I'd like to trade. Who wants to trade for it? Okay. Next day, he got an answer back from somebody that traded him a hand-sculpted doorknob. So we put that back up on Craigslist. Then a couple days later, he had somebody that traded him a camp stove with fuel for the hand-carved doorknob. He put that back on Craigslist, and he traded that for a Honda generator. A little Honda, it makes electricity. Traded the generator for an instant party, which was a keg with a Budweiser sign welded to it, and it had an IOU to fill it with beer. He kept the IOU, and he traded the keg for a snowmobile. Traded the snowmobile for a trip to Yak, British Columbia. I don't know where that is. Doesn't sound very pleasant, Yak, but it's somewhere in Canada. He traded the trip to Canada for a cube van. He traded the van for a recording contract. Traded the recording contract for a year's rent in an apartment in Phoenix. Traded the apartment for an afternoon with Alice Cooper. Traded the afternoon with Alice Cooper for a role in a film, and he traded the role in a film for a 2-story farmhouse. So what's a paperclip worth?
Beyond words.
Yeah, in this case, it's at least worth a farmhouse, right? Now, if you think this is a fluke, there was a man that tried a year later to replicate this in LA. And he put up a butterfly. It was a paperclip that had like a little butterfly on it, kind of an artistic paperclip. He ended up trading the paperclip all the way up to a 1982 Ferrari. He drove the Ferrari for 3 months until it needed an oil change. Then he was told that the oil change was $9,000, so he traded the Ferrari for a house. So the thing is, we've got to learn to tune our mindset, right? Abundance is everywhere, and I don't just mean money. Money is just one form of abundance. Love is everywhere. Health is everywhere. Happiness is everywhere. Joy is everywhere. People ask me all the time, I'll probably repeat this tonight, people ask me all the time about, what's your number one success principle? And these are all my success principles I like to teach, but if you're going to pin me down to one in the next 10 seconds, it would be this. Turn off the frickin' TV. The TV is pollution. And most people don't know this, but it's scientifically proven since 1964 that when you turn on a TV, because of the way the TV redraws the screen, it's called a 60 hertz flash, a TV actually puts you into a hypnotic trance state. It puts you in what's called an alpha wave state. The beta brainwave state is the awake state. Alpha wave is a little bit slower. It's the same state you go into if you were to go to a hypnotherapist, and it opens up the subconscious mind. So every time you sit down at the TV, your subconscious mind goes, "Feed me, Seymour," right? And everything that you see on the TV goes directly into the subconscious. Okay? Bypasses your critical faculty completely. Yes?
I know in the United States it's illegal to buy hypnotic videos, but do you still
No.
No. That's what it was.
No, it's illegal to make subliminal videos. There's a federal law against subliminal video.
Do you still have access to them, though, you think? Or whatever you watch is like really what you're saying. Your eyes are the windows to your soul.
Mhm.
Well,
That's
it's
what it is. So,
CDs and stuff. It's just advertisers can't use messaging.
In advertising, yeah. Dennis Nermella, he tells stories that he used to work at a theater, and he used to splice in pictures of popcorn and Coke, and people would get up out of the movie theater and go buy it. They'd get up in the middle of the movie to go buy Coke and stuff like that.
he is a character.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is illegal, but hypnosis videos are fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, abundance is everywhere. We just got to learn how to change our mindset, tune our mindset. So some common limiting beliefs that hold people back. See if you have any of these. And if you do, these are some good things to work on this weekend, because we're going to talk about how to get rid of limiting beliefs. I'm going to teach you a tool to get rid of them like that. First one, I don't deserve to be successful, or I don't deserve to be that successful. Right? There's people who believe they deserve to be successful, but there comes a point where there comes a number where they look at it and they go, no, that's too much money, right? Or that's too much success, right? So it's either an absolute, like I don't deserve to be successful, or there's some sort of a number where they hit it and they go, nope, I don't deserve that much. Okay. Number two, there's not enough. There's not enough for me. This is a very common limiting belief when it comes to money. And I'll tell you, if you've ever had a doubt that there's enough money for everyone, I challenge you to watch a cartoon called The Provocateur on YouTube. The Provocateur. It'll explain to you exactly how imaginary money is in our society. Money is imaginary. And people get locked into this belief that money is real and that there's a limited supply of it. And this is where people get angry at all the wealthy people, right? Because they look at wealthy people and they go, it's not fair that they have all that money. Because they have so much money, we don't have money. But it's an illusion, because money literally is made from nothing. It's since we've been taken off the gold standard, we're on what's called a debt-based economy. Money is an illusion, it's imaginary. They print these little gold, green pieces of paper. They're not worth anything. And money can be made just like that by the Federal Reserve or by the government. So it's a great video, but it will completely invalidate the belief that there's not enough, right? There's plenty of money. Matter of fact, one of my beliefs is that all money comes from ideas. Is there a limit on the number of ideas that you can have? Of course not. Next, if I take more, there's less for others. There's a lot of people that have guilt about attaining wealth because they believe if they accumulate wealth that they're taking it away from other people. It's kind of the same, it's an inverted belief of the previous one, right? Not enough for everyone. Number 4, only greedy people are rich. It's a very common belief these days. This is actually perpetuated by the media. The media will hypnotize you to believe this world is an ugly, awful place with wars going on and every rich person wants to steal money out of your pockets and all these bad things are going on. I tell people all the time, if you want to see beauty in this world, shut off the TV and walk out your front door. There's beauty everywhere, right? There's good things all over the place, but the media will hypnotize you to believe it doesn't exist. The fact is, and this is something, like I said, I made a concerted effort, a conscious effort to put myself around more successful people. I didn't come from money. I grew up very poor. But when I started putting myself around successful people, and that includes wealthy people, I was shocked to find out that wealthy people almost entirely were not anything like I expected them to be. Very generous, sometimes way more generous than people in poverty. I was in poverty when we didn't have a penny to give anybody, right? And a lot of times, Harv Eker talks about this in the book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, when he became rich almost overnight. He moved into a wealthy neighborhood and they were like, well, we want this nice house. We probably won't care for the people, but we want to be in this neighborhood. And they were shocked to find out how friendly and open and welcoming those people were. Like I said, the people who say that it's lonely at the top are probably on the wrong peak. Because what I find is the more that I become successful and the more I put myself around more successful people, the more welcoming they are, the more generous they are. And it's a very common and limiting belief that only greedy people are rich. Why would this limit people, by the way? Only greedy people are rich. We don't want to be greedy. Subconsciously, this is a saboteur, right? We don't want to be greedy, so we will sabotage ourselves to not become wealthy. So we got to let go of this limiting belief that only greedy people are rich. Are there some rich people that are greedy? You betcha. About the same percentage of poor people that are greedy, right? If you took a cross-section of greedy people from every level of economy, you'd probably have about the same percentage. There are some people that are just egomaniacs and megalomaniacs and just greedy people. But you're going to find that in every socioeconomic segment. So you got to let go of the limiting belief. Number 5, I'll have to lose my integrity to get rich. So many people have formed a belief that the only way to be successful is to sweat, right? And this is one of the big things that I teach, is that we don't get paid for the sweat that we pour. We get paid for the value that we bring into the world. If the job that you do brings a little amount of value to people, then you'll be paid a little amount of money. If what you do brings a massive amount of value to people, you'll be paid a massive amount of money, regardless of how much sweat you put into it, right? Now, there's always exceptions to that rule. There's some people that say, well, if that was true, then teachers would be millionaires. I agree. Teachers should be millionaires. And that's one exception to the rule. But for the most part, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're in charge of your own salary, this is one of the big things, right? So because people have been taught that you have to sweat to get rich, the only way they can conceive of anybody amassing wealth like that, wealth beyond something they can even comprehend, is that they must have broken the law to do it, or they must have screwed people over. Number 6, what if I lose my family and friends? That's a big one. Number 7, the rich don't care about people. They only care about money. It's kind of the same as the greedy one. Number 8, money is the root of all evils. We'll talk about this one during the training. It's a very common one that I hear. Number 9, it's hard to make a lot of money, or it takes a lot of hard work. One of the things you'll hear if you study successful people, you'll hear them all say the same thing. Breaking the $1 million mark was always a matter of mindset. It's a mindset shift that happens. And usually that shift is from what we call effort to energy, right? Effort to energy. We're going to talk about that this weekend. Number 10, I like to be more spiritual than to focus on material things. There's a big move toward the spiritual side of things these days. But really, here's the thing. Money is not unspiritual. Money is not unspiritual. There's a lot of very spiritual things you can do with money. There's a lot of very good things you can do with money. Most people don't realize this. Mother Teresa, who's considered one of the most spiritual people to walk our earth, Mother Teresa died a very wealthy woman. She had over $1 million in net worth. Okay? She didn't live like a wealthy woman, but she had a lot of money. There's even a great case that can be made that Jesus was wealthy. There's some really compelling cases out there of people saying that, like, people say, well, Jesus wore rags, but if you read the Bible, the Roman soldiers fought over his rags after he died, right? They fought over his clothing because it was seamless. They said it was the highest quality seamless clothing. And the 12 apostles, they had a treasurer. What would you need a treasurer for if you were broke?
Well,
Treasures.
The other thing, too, is one of them was equivalent to a lawyer, one of them was a physician. It's not like they were this is another thing that
Yeah.
a lot of people ignore, but if you really go into detail, because aren't average Joes, they're really educated individuals
Yeah.
with a far trade. That's why the people
Ultimate
around
mastermind.
his ministry, when he got popular, like, well, who the hell is this rabbi think he is? He's using Matthew, the tax collector, over there.
Right.
I've done a study on it, too.
Yeah.
There's a lot that causes you to double question.
There's a lot of spiritual limiting beliefs that come around money. So let's talk about some belief busting. This is a really simple 6-question thing that you can ask yourself if you have a limiting belief. I actually learned this from Joe Vitale in his book. I think it was the book, The Lost User Manual for the Mind. Very cool thing. So all this is a questionnaire that you run yourself through. If you have a limiting belief, the first question to ask yourself is, what is the belief? What is that limiting belief? Okay. Second question to ask is, why do I believe that? This is a really interesting question. One of the few times we ever ask why. Okay. Why do I believe that? Sometimes you'll find that it's not even your own belief. You'll realize that was my parents that believed that. And so I believe it because my parents believed it. By second step, it can already start shaking up that limiting belief and releasing it. Okay. Third question, what am I concerned or afraid would happen if I didn't believe that? Am I afraid something would happen to me? Or am I afraid I would do something if I didn't have this limiting belief? Fourth question, do I believe that? Fifth question, whose belief is all that really? And then finally, number 6, what can I choose to believe instead, which is my belief, which will support me in living a magnificent life? And what I find is you could take almost any limiting belief and you can run it through these 6 questions. Limiting beliefs generally don't survive to the 6th question, right? And then the 6th question is where you shift your focus to something that's more positive for you. Very cool little thing here. This was, actually Kayla brought this up. We saw this video that showed the distribution of wealth in America. And it was showing the richest people over here had this much money if you were to split it up, and then if you were to split America up into 100 people, and then the poorest people over here had this much money. They were talking about how unfair and unequal it was that people on this side had all this wealth. And Kayla brought up an interesting question, which I think we sort of addressed earlier, which was, what if you just took every person in this graph and you just switched their bank accounts? Right? What if you were to take the richest person on the right, which would be, of course, Bill Gates, $1 billion, and you were to take the person on the left, who probably has, $74 and probably a lot of debt, and you were to switch them, how long do you think that they would stay where they were?
Not long.
No. And the answer is 2 to 5 years. I think what you would find is it would completely switch over. The person who got Bill Gates' $74 billion would probably figure out a way to be broke in 5 years. Bill Gates would be back to being a millionaire or a billionaire by that point, and it would just shift right back. Okay, because the key is not having the money. The key is in having the mindset and knowing what to do with it. So here are some limiting beliefs that I like that really help me when it comes to attracting wealth and abundance in my life. Number 1, I believe the universe is abundant. By universe, I'm going to use the word universe a lot this weekend. It's sort of an exchangeable word, okay? So it could be the universe itself. It could be God, goddess, love, light, source, whatever that higher power is or bigger thing that you think is out there. I use the word universe to kind of label all of those. So my belief is the universe is abundant. That it's all about it. Everywhere you look in the universe, there is abundance. The universe wants me to prosper. That's my personal belief. I believe that the universe wants me to prosper. What other purpose would I be here for if it wasn't for growth and prosperity? Right? Any other purpose doesn't make sense. So if you believe that there's an intelligent creator, if you believe there's an intelligent reason for us to be here, it only makes sense that we would be here to grow and to prosper. Number 3, all prosperity begins with an idea. I don't care what prosperity. All prosperity begins with an idea. The guy that invented the pet rock, stupid idea, made him a millionaire, right? But it was an idea, and it was an idea that he took inspired action on. Okay, most of us don't take action on our ideas, and then 10 years later we go, hey, that person stole my idea. They didn't steal it; they just took action faster than you. Number 4, the universe is pure intelligence. It responds to your state of mind. I do believe that your mental state dictates your results in life. Number 5, increasing your prosperity requires you to change your focus. If you want to change your prosperity in your life, you've got to learn to focus on something different, because it's your current focus that got you what you have now. Number 6, this is a fun game I love to play. It's called the I Can Afford Everything I Want game. Most of us, when we see something really expensive that we like, most of us will look at it and go, I can't afford that, or I wish I could afford that. Neither of those two things really program you for success. So one of the things, I learned this as a kid from my grandfather. Anytime you look at something, there's a yacht down in Newport that's owned by the Bacardi company. It's this massive blue yacht. It's the most gorgeous yacht I've ever seen. Every time I walk by it, I look at it and go, I can afford that. Now, it doesn't mean I have the money in my bank account to buy it. It doesn't mean I'm going to spend any money or take any action on it. I'm just training myself to have a better mindset. Okay? It shifts my box. So everything that you see that you want, say, I can afford that.
So how did you guys end up being poor?
Because my mom had a personality disorder. I think that was the biggest part of it. My mom didn't learn very well from my grandfather. As a matter of fact, she rebelled against pretty much everything that he did. And I think that was a big part of it. So I'll tell a little bit more deeper of my story tonight when we get into the full event. But my mom was 14 years old with a baby, and she didn't like my grandparents' rules, and so she moved out and married her boyfriend, who was 18 years old. And I think that was really the initial condition that started that. Yeah. Number 7, money is an abstraction of energy. The amount of energy that you put into something, the amount of value that you bring, is where the value comes out of it. Number 8, as you increase the abstractness of your ideas, their value increases. So what this means, pretty much everywhere you look in the world, the bigger picture thinker a person is, the more value every thought is. So I like to look at, there's a guy at Apple who probably came up with the microchip that ran the Mac, right? Probably Steve Wozniak, right? There's a guy who designed very intricate details of the chips that made a Macintosh what a Macintosh was. Did he get paid as much as Steve Jobs? Not nearly, right? Because the people who work on the details, the value of their thoughts tends to be smaller. The people who focus on big picture and vision in our society tend to make more money per thought. Steve Jobs made a lot more dollars per thought than the guys who soldered the motherboards together. So if you want to increase your prosperity, one of the things you have to do is think bigger, right? Think bigger. Start thinking vision. Number 9, money has no intelligence of its own. It only responds to your instructions to it. Number 10, money demands attention on money. You ever known people that are really skilled at something, but they can't seem to make any money doing it? Generally, those are the people who say, well, I would do this for free because I love it so much. And those are the people who, I hear a lot of people all the time, they go, no, I don't want to focus on the money. I just want to do what I just want to help people. Great. You're going to help a ton of people, but you're going to be broke doing it. So how many people are you really helping if you're broke? Right? Because you don't have the resources that needs to reach out and connect with more people. So, here's the thing. I don't think money should ever be a top priority, because I think people do weird things for money when it's their number one priority, but it should be a priority, right? You should have some money goals and focus on money. Number 11, the universe demands balance. This means that when you give somebody value, there needs to be an exchange of value, okay, in order for both people to grow. If you're out there just doing work for free for people and you're not accepting anything in return, then both people diminishes their energy. On the other hand, when there's an exchange of energy, both people grow. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is what we call the law of compensation. It doesn't, by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be money that you receive. It could be anything, any sort of energy exchange, but there's got to be an exchange of energy.
If you're teaching NLP,
Yeah.
and you're doing it for free at first,
Mhm.
and the clients are helping you out, that's a fair exchange.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of times if we have somebody that really can't afford to pay for something, then, we'll have, there's times when I've done trades with people. I don't like to do trades generally because the trades are not usually equitable, but we've done it before. And like in this case, we gave free tickets away for this weekend, right? What's the energy exchange that we're getting though? We're able to fill a room and we're able to videotape the last time that we're doing it, right? Now we can turn it into a home study course that anybody around the world can buy 24 hours a day. So that's the exchange that we get in this case. But there's always got to be an exchange of some sort.
And also, it's a loss leader too, and
Sure.
we may be interested in other products.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then finally, some keys to creating abundance. We'll get out of here. Realize it's okay to want what you want. Desire is not a bad thing and it's not unspiritual. We've been sort of misled to believe that if you want things, that's unspiritual. Just nothing wrong with wanting. Number 2, focus on creating value for other people. The money will flow. Number 3, live your life on purpose and with a purpose. Number 4, create the feelings of wealth first and wealth will flow. Number 5, to change your level of success, change your peer group. We already talked about that one. Number 6, wealth attracts wealth. This is kind of an interesting one. Now, this doesn't mean that it takes money to make money, but the better you get at the money game, the easier it is for you to attract more wealth. Number 7, we already talked about this one. Ask how questions, not why questions. Number 8, this is what we're doing here this weekend. Resolve negative emotions from the past and limiting decisions. Limiting decisions is another word for limiting beliefs. Because your subconscious mind won't make you a liar. Right? So we get people all the time, they try to affirmations every day in every way. I'm getting richer and richer. And then the subconscious mind goes, liar. Right? So you've got to resolve that stuff from the past that says you can't do it. Number 9, pay yourself first. A lot of times people get all into paying other people and paying other stuff. They don't have anything left over from themselves. There's got to be motivation for you to create more abundance in your life. So make sure that you're paying yourself. Number 10, you get what you focus on, so focus on what you want. Number 11, live life with gratitude. Gratitude's like rocket fuel for the law of attraction. And number 12, remember money is an amplifier. Money doesn't make you anything. There's a lot of people that say money will make you greedy, money will make you evil, money will make you bad, money will make you uncaring. Money doesn't make anybody anything. All it does is amplify, right? So if you're an unhappy person before you get the money will make you more unhappy. If you're a happy person, money will amplify your happiness, right? Money just amplifies things. Number 13, trust that the universe will replenish. That's my definition of abundance, is the trust that the universe will always replenish. Number 14, think big and act big. Number 15, play the money game to win. Aim for massive wealth and abundance. Good stuff, guys? Yes. Awesome. Hopefully this has stimulated some thinking in you and got you thinking about different ways to be successful. We are back here at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. So that gives you about 50 minutes to grab some food or coffee or whatever it is you want to grab.